Oh, there we are, okay. So today is March 8th, Monday, and this is the House Committee on Small Business. And at this point, I welcome everybody to our second meeting of the year. And we need a roll call vote, a roll call of who's here.
Chair McEntee.
Here.
First Vice Chair, Here. Second Vice Chair,
Chairwoman, we can't hear.
They can't hear.
Is your mic on, Joe?
Carol?
Yep, I hear you, Julie. We're trying to fix it. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay.
It's not. No, it's not.
A little technical difficulty.
Yeah, no,
Get a little closer.
Closer? Can you hear me now? Okay. All right. Want to start over?
Sure. Madam Clerk, will you take the roll call?
Chair McEntee.
Here.
First Vice Chair Costantino.
Here.
Second Vice Chair Cortvend.
Here.
Representative Caldwell.
Here.
Representative Carson. Representative Carson. Representative Casimiro.
Here.
Representative Kassar. Representative Diaz. Representative Fenton Fung.
Here.
Representative Giraldo.
Here.
Representative Perez. Representative Phillips.
Present.
Representative Price. Representative Franklin Vassell. Representative Slater. Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. So today I have the distinct honor of welcoming our first guest, who is Treasurer Seth Magaziner, who we all know well. He's been the Treasurer of the State of Rhode Island since 2015. He's been an advocate for small business and growing our economy throughout this pandemic and even before that. His focus on small business will help us a lot today, and he's got a slideshow, I believe, or a PowerPoint to show us, and he's going to fill us with lots of details. So welcome, Mr. Treasurer. We're happy to have you with us.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you and congratulations on your new role with this committee. Thank you to all the members of the committee for your leadership and your advocacy for small business at this crucial time. I know that a number of you on this committee are small business owners yourselves, and so I want to thank you for, again, the expertise that you bring to this conversation. What I'm going to do today is touch briefly on the state of small business in Rhode Island, some of the resources that our office offers that may be of assistance to small businesses, and then I really want to get into some detail, some ideas and some recommendations about ways that Rhode Island can better support small businesses, both in this time of coronavirus, but also beyond. I have some slides. It runs 15 to 20 minutes, but feel free to, if you'd like to interrupt me and make this conversational, by all means do so. Now, I can't actually see the screen, but hopefully somebody is moving it along. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, first let's just do a high overview of the state of small business in Rhode Island. You know, it is often said, and it is true, that small business is the heart of Rhode Island's economy. And not just our economy, but our quality of life and our character. You know, that's what makes our neighborhoods and our communities a special place, is having vibrant Main Street small businesses. And prior to COVID-19, nearly 53% of the private sector workforce was employed in small businesses in Rhode Island, including more than 72% of Rhode Islanders who were employed in accommodation and food services, more than 60% of Rhode Islanders employed in manufacturing, More than 65% of Rhode Islanders employed in the arts. So again, small business is a big deal for Rhode Island and an important pillar of our economy. This past year has been extraordinarily difficult. This is data that you see in front of you from an organization called Opportunity Insights. It's a organization formed by a group of economists from Harvard and Brown, and what they do is they aggregate data from things like payroll processing services. So this is actual data from Rhode Island over the past year. Small business revenue declined by more than 47%. 47% decline in revenue by Rhode Island small businesses. Absolutely devastating. And on the next slide, it's no surprise that with that decline in revenue, more than 40% of small businesses in Rhode Island shut down over the past year. There are 40% fewer small businesses operating in Rhode Island today than a year ago. Disproportionately, it is entrepreneurs and business owners in communities of color that have been impacted. This is not Rhode Island data, this is national from the New York Times, that showed that in the worst of the pandemic, the number of small business owners actively working declined significantly across all categories, but again, much steeper declines among Asian, Hispanic, and Black small business owners. So this recession has hurt all small businesses, but some more than others. Now on the next slide, this is what I think is one of the most important points that we need to be focused on. The question is not whether or not the economy will come back. It will. And by some measures, the economy already is coming back. The graph on the screen there now is consumer spending in Rhode Island, which has rebounded to roughly normal levels. So in the early months of the pandemic, people stopped spending money, people were scared, they didn't know what was going to happen, they pulled back, and now gradually over the course of the year, consumer spending has come back to more or less normal levels. So people are starting to spend money again. So the question is not whether or not the economy is going to come back. The question is, who is going to benefit, right? So consumer spending has rebounded. Small business revenue in Rhode Island is still down 47%. But in 2020, Amazon's revenue went up by 38%. And not just the online retailers, but larger businesses, chain businesses in general, had a good year last year. Walmart's revenue, Walmart is not a significant online retailer, they're a brick and mortar. Walmart's revenue was up 7% as well. So I think the big challenge that we have in front of us is making sure that we can rebuild a robust small business economy in Rhode Island so that when the economy reopens and when things come back, it is not just the big players that stand to benefit, but the Main Street businesses as well, those Main Street businesses that are so important not only to our economy but to our quality of life. And so when we get into the discussion of ideas and recommendations in a bit, one part of it is going to be making sure that we support our existing small businesses to help them get the rest of the way through the pandemic. But I'm also going to present some ideas and some recommendations on how we can make it easier for new small businesses to form in Rhode Island so that we can start to fill that void that has been left by those that have closed down, and we can ensure that small businesses, Main Street businesses, continue to get a strong percentage of market share after the pandemic is over. So let's talk about resources. Our office seeks to support small businesses in a number of ways. First is our Bank Local program. Now, Bank Local it's important to understand the context of how small business lending works in order to understand this program. The data shows clearly that small businesses are more likely to get loan applications approved by community banks and credit unions, as opposed to the biggest national banks. The big national banks do small business lending as well. They have to do some amount of it in order to meet what's called their CRA requirements. They get some enhancements in their small business lending from the SBA 7A loan program. But by and large, community banks and credit unions are more likely to approve small business loans and are more likely to have small business loans take up a large percentage of their loan book. So small businesses, so community banks and credit unions do more small business lending as a percent of the loans that they make, and they're more likely to approve those applications. And I think there's a few reasons for this. One is that for the largest banks, it's not as efficient or not as worth their time to spend a lot of time and energy on the smaller, $50,000 loans, $25,000 loans, et cetera. But also, smaller community banks and credit unions can offer more flexibility oftentimes, right? Because if you're a small business or you have an idea for a small business and you're a little different, you're not cookie cutter, you don't fall neatly into a category, if you go to one of the larger institutions, they may have to call halfway across the country to get permission to make some sort of an exception for you in their underwriting standards. If it's a community bank or a credit union here in Rhode Island, that loan officer might just have to walk down the hall, right? So it's important to have a robust small business ecosystem to also have a robust community bank and credit union ecosystem. So the Bank Local program was created a few years ago in our office. Under this program, we move millions of dollars of the state's cash, our money, back home to Rhode Island community banks and credit unions to support their small business lending. And the way it works is very simple. If there's a local lender in Rhode Island, a local community bank or credit union, who's getting ready to make a small business loan, they can contact us, and we will move an equal amount of cash into that institution and pledge to keep it there for the term of the loan. So if they're making a $100,000 loan to someone looking to start a coffee shop or a hair salon, we will move $100,000 of the state's cash into that institution. And we will do a 2-to-1 match if it is a loan to a business run by an entrepreneur who falls into a category that traditionally has had a harder time accessing capital. So we'll do 2-to-1 loans for 2-to-1 matches for loans to businesses run by women, people of color, veterans, and first-time entrepreneurs. Since we started this program a few years ago, we have moved nearly $40 million of the state's cash back home to local community banks and credit unions, supporting nearly 350 small business loans. I guarantee there's probably one or two in each of your districts. I know Chair McEntee down in your neck of the woods, I think the Johnny Cake Center was a recent Bank Local, not business, but nonprofit that benefited. We're happy to provide lists, and we've got a, in the appendix at the end of the presentation that will provide you all just kind of a summary of how many loans have been supported by towns, by city and town through the Bank Local program. Another program of our office that we are very proud of is the Unclaimed Property Program. Unclaimed property is like a statewide lost and found for money. If a company owes you money, but they don't know how to find you, under state law, they are not allowed to just keep your money. They are required to turn it over to our office, and it is our job to reunite Rhode Islanders with that missing money. So it might be old money that was left in a bank account, or an old insurance settlement, or a refund from a vendor or from a company that you've worked with. Since I started in 2015, we've reunited nearly 100,000 Rhode Islanders with their missing money, totaling more than $73 million. Thanks to Representative Casimiro, who I know is on the call. She sponsored a piece of legislation a few years ago that makes it much easier for us to reunite Rhode Islanders with that missing money. Now, instead of only waiting for people to come to us and file a claim, we can proactively match our unclaimed property list with other databases in state or federal government and proactively send people checks in the mail and get them their missing money back. But the reason I bring it up in this context today is that it's not just individuals, but also businesses that can be owed missing money. And so we've actually started an awareness campaign about this. We want to encourage small businesses in Rhode Island, go to our database. You can access it at www.findrimoney.com. Search not only yourself as an individual, but also your business, your nonprofit organization, and we will reunite you with that missing money. Our goal is to reunite 1,000 small businesses in Rhode Island with their missing money over the next month, and we are well on our way to doing that. Another resource is a relatively new one at the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank. We worked with some of you a few years ago on legislation to create this program called the CPACE program. It helps small businesses and nonprofits in Rhode Island get financing for energy efficiency and renewable energy projects. So it's a win-win. You can modernize your facility if you own your property as a small business. You can get solar panels on the roof. You can get other energy and environmental retrofit improvements, save money on your utility bills. It's low-cost financing, and by saving money, you can reinvest in your business and grow. Since launching, this CPACE program at the Infrastructure Bank has invested roughly $65 million into small businesses to help them with their alternative energy and energy efficiency projects. And it really runs the gamut, like from a manufacturer in Westerly, dry cleaner in South Kingstown, daycare center in North Kingstown. We're at the point now where there's been a few dozen of these projects that have already been completed, and so anyone who wants more information on that can go to the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank website. The last thing I'll mention about our office is we've been working very hard, and in particular in the early days of COVID, to make sure that banks and other lenders have been doing the right thing in processing PPP applications for small businesses. You may recall that when the first round of PPP launched, there were initially issues with businesses being turned away, even though they were eligible under federal law. They were being turned away if they didn't already have an existing relationship with the bank. In some cases, there were reports of banks basically using the PPP process to try to sell other products in conjunction with processing a PPP loan. Once we got word of that in the launch of the first round of PPP, we responded strongly. We sent a letter and we reached out to all of the lenders in Rhode Island and we said, listen, you have to make these PPP loans available to every eligible Rhode Island small business, regardless of whether they buy another product from you or not, regardless of whether they have prior relationships with you or not. If you do not do the right thing, we will remember it and we will take that into consideration when the state decides where to take its banking services. Since then, we have also kept a running list of which banks and credit unions and other lenders will process PPP applications for any eligible borrower. So if there's any business that is having a hard time finding a lender who will process their PPP loan application, they can reach out to us and we can direct them to someone who will. It's been less of an issue lately. It was an issue in the early days of PPP. I won't spend a lot of time on the next section because you know most of it already, but before we begin our conversation about ideas and recommendations to help small businesses, it is important to mention some of the other major programs that have been out there. The biggest, of course, is that PPP program. I know Mark Hayward is going to be presenting shortly, so I won't steal his thunder, but PPP Round 1 helps nearly 18,000 Rhode Island small businesses with loans totaling nearly $2 billion, forgivable loans that work like grants if they're used the right way. PPP Round 2 is still open for a couple more weeks. Thus far, more than 8,000 businesses have benefited with more than $700 million of assistance. The economic injury disaster loan is now up to more than 10,000 small businesses and nearly $600 million of assistance. The American Rescue Plan, which is the federal stimulus that is currently working its way through Congress, is scheduled for its final vote in the House of Representatives tomorrow and is expected to be signed into law tomorrow. Two major sources of assistance for small business potentially in this legislation. There is $25 billion for a grant program specifically for restaurants. So we'll have to keep an eye on that in Rhode Island and make sure that once those rules are finalized for how restaurants can qualify for that money, that we get the word out about it. And of course, thanks to the leadership of our Rhode Island congressional delegation, Rhode Island is on track to get over $1 billion of state aid and over $600 million of municipal aid, which can be used for several different things, one of which is to mitigate the economic impacts of COVID-19, which could include assistance for small businesses. So I imagine that one of the focuses of this committee going forward that we'd be happy to work with you on is figuring out what a good program to assist small businesses with potential stimulus money could look like.
Seth, excuse me, Mr. Treasurer, could you repeat those numbers that you think Rhode Island's going to get again for restaurants and for cities and towns?
Yeah, so the restaurant money has not been allocated by state yet, to my knowledge. The total amount in the federal legislation is $25 billion.
Oh, 25.
For restaurants. And then for state and local aid, the total amount is $350 billion.
And
The
that's,
formula for that
yeah.
has been figured out, and Rhode Island at the state level would get just over $1 billion.
Wow, that's great.
Several municipalities would also qualify for aid totaling more than $600 million. What would happen now process-wise, as I understand it, assuming all goes as planned and it's passed by the House and signed by the President tomorrow, there'll be basically a period where the Biden administration will flesh out the rules and regulations for how exactly that money can be used. So what I'm hearing is that it'll be a few weeks, maybe a month before those rules are fleshed out and the money can start being delivered to the states. But we know from the legislation that one of the permissible uses is the phrase they use is mitigate the economic impacts of COVID-19. So certainly I would think small business assistance would fall under that definition. I won't spend, again, much time on this, but at the state level, I do think it's important to recognize that state government in Rhode Island has had a number of programs during the course of the year to assist small businesses. The first and largest was the Restore Rhode Island grant program run out of Commerce that awarded just over $52 million to 4,000 small businesses in the form of grants. They then also launched the Business Adaptation Grant Program, which was funding to help with plexiglass and PPE and other things that businesses needed to change their layouts and their models to adapt to social distancing. 109 businesses received $3.5 million. The Rhode Island On Pause grant was a new grant program for businesses that were disproportionately impacted by the increased social distancing measures put in place over the holidays. That ended up totaling just over $41 million and 4,400 businesses. All of these programs are now closed. So that's the overview of where we are. Getting into the recommendations, before we start, I want to kind of set the stage in a few different ways. Two categories here. I think first, we should have a conversation of how stimulus money can best be used to help small businesses in Rhode Island. The stimulus money, there's a lot of it. It can be used for this purpose, but it is one-time money, right? It is one-time money, which means that we need to get it out quickly. We need to use it as a way that will maximize impact up front without necessarily taking on other obligations later on down the road. We also, a couple of the recommendations that I have here are sort of high-level recommendations for how stimulus money can be used. But there are also, of course, a lot of things that we can do in Rhode Island to help small businesses that won't cost a lot of money and that won't require a lot of stimulus. So some of what I'm going to present now is uses of stimulus funding, but the bulk of these recommendations are actually things that we can do that will make a big difference for small businesses and will not cost a lot of money and will not have a lot of budget impact. And this is really just based on ideas that we have gotten from businesses themselves, through our interactions with them in our office over the last few years. And then, as I mentioned earlier, some of these ideas are how to help small businesses that are currently operating and trying to make it the rest of the way through COVID-19. But some of these recommendations also are for ways to make it easier for new businesses in Rhode Island to form so that we can continue to have a robust small business ecosystem. So as I said, feel free to interrupt me at any point. But we'll start, we can just move ahead to the next slide. We'll start with stimulus money. So, as mentioned earlier, many states, including Rhode Island, over the past year have had financial assistance programs for small businesses. And now that we've been through a year of this, we've learned a lot. We've seen what's worked in Rhode Island and what hasn't. We've seen what's worked in other states and what hasn't. And our view is that if there is stimulus funding, which it looks like there will be, Rhode Island should launch a new program to assist small businesses in Rhode Island. And the best programs to do this are grants, not loans, because it is easier to get grants out faster. It's less administration, it's less red tape, more impactful. The best grant programs are simple and do not have unnecessarily complex criteria to get a grant, and tailored to small businesses in the hardest hit industries. While most types of small businesses have taken a big hit this year, not all have, so there should be some thought given to whether we want to tailor this to specific industries. Now understand there are trade-offs here, right? So the simpler the criteria, the more likely it is that somebody may get a grant who doesn't really need it. But in our view, it's best to get as much of this money out as fast as possible in a way that's easy for businesses to access. Because from talking to some business owners who operate, maybe one restaurant in Rhode Island and one in Massachusetts, or one closed store in Rhode Island and another one in Connecticut, one of the pieces of feedback that we got was just how much more laborious the process was to get an approval in Rhode Island relative to other places. You can't really see it, but there's a screenshot up there from the Boston Small Business Grant Program that was launched earlier this year. That's a good example, in our estimation, of how to do it. Very simple. There were 3 tiers, depending on the size of the business, how many employees you have. Minimal paperwork required. You just had to be, show that you were a registered business in the city, how many employees you have. And again, grant program, it was, either $2,000, $5,000, or $10,000. Boom, 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 easy, simple. Does that mean that it's perfect? No. But again, the feedback that we got on this one was that it was good because it was easy and it was quick, and these business owners who are juggling a million other things didn't have to spend days and days going back and forth with their accountants in order to qualify. A second consideration for stimulus funding, potentially, is what we call the PPP for new businesses. So the PPP program, as you all know, was a forgivable loan for businesses, where as long as that loan money was spent on certain things like payroll and rent and utilities, the loan would be forgiven, like a grant. Great program to help existing small businesses. But if we also want to make it easier for new businesses to form in this recovery, we could look at doing a state-level version of this for new business formation, where if a Rhode Islander is looking to start a new business, and again, we could tailor it by industry or by size, they could access a forgivable loan that, as long as they spent it on startup costs related to starting a business, capital equipment, first month of payroll, etc., the loan could be forgiven. If this is too expensive or too much, for a program like this to be viable, a cheaper alternative might be for a year just waiving all of the licensing and permitting fees associated with starting a business. So those are the stimulus ideas. Now I'll end with a few others that, if you chose to move forward with them, would be less expensive and not have any significant ongoing budget impact. Recommendation 3 here also has to do with making it easier to start a new business. Several states have what's called an SEA program, or a self-employment assistance program, as part of their unemployment insurance system. And basically, in simple terms, it allows people to keep earning unemployment benefits for a couple of months while they start a new business. One of the biggest barriers to starting a small business, particularly for people from disadvantaged communities and lower ends of the income spectrum, excuse me, is you have to support yourself while you're starting up. Excuse me. I will, thank you.
Mr. Treasurer, take a breather. You're giving us a lot of information here.
Yeah. So, New Hampshire, New York, Oregon, Delaware, there are several states that have programs like this as part of their unemployment insurance system. You stay on unemployment for a couple months while you're in the process of starting up a business, and it helps reduce a barrier, particularly for people who come from those lower income backgrounds and have a harder time floating themselves for that period. It would be paid for out of the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund, not out of the state budget. So again, there's no ongoing impact on the state budget or the state structural deficit. Next, tax relief can mean a lot of different things, but there are actually, I think, some changes we can make to our tax system in Rhode Island that will not cost the state a lot of money, but will ease a lot of pain and headaches for small businesses. 3 things specifically, and we'll go to the next slide for the first one. Number 1, I believe at this point, the state of Rhode Island should allow penalty-free delays on certain taxes for small businesses in Rhode Island. Delays on income and sales tax in particular. This was done for the income tax last year because the federal government went ahead and did that. We did not do it for the sales tax. We should now. Now, when I say this has no budget impact, it's important to understand. If we defer these revenues, even into the next fiscal year, they still count as revenues for the current fiscal year for budgeting purposes. So it's not going to increase the deficit, the budget deficit. It still counts as revenues for this year. If, for example, we were to defer the March, April, May, June sales tax into July or August, or whenever social distance guidelines are lifted. It does have an impact on cash balance, but our cash balance currently is strong. The state general fund currently has over $800 million of cash. In addition to that $800 million, earlier in the crisis, our office secured $300 million of lines of credit at very low interest rates. So we have the cash cushion where we can do this. Again, no budget impact. Cash flow impact can be mitigated and managed, and this could provide an important source of relief for small businesses in Rhode Island until social distancing guidelines are lifted.
Excuse me, Mr. Treasurer, so these are all just COVID-related until we're out of the pandemic, basically? The
Yeah.
recommendation that you were just discussing about the penalty-free extensions through the spring?
Correct. I would
Yeah.
think until social distancing guidelines are lifted.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Yeah,
No,
whenever that may be.
Yeah, we got to try, you're clearly on the right track of how do we survive this and get everybody through to a time when they can make their money again.
Yeah,
But thank
exactly.
you.
Yeah, and last year, there were concerns about whether the state had the cash flow in order to manage a deferral of sales tax, so it wasn't done last year. This year, in our estimation, we clearly do have the ability to do it, and so we should. Another budget-friendly tax relief measure is free tax consultations. This is not a COVID-specific thing, but it's just something that's a good idea. So I've heard this story a number of times from different small businesses. It goes something like this. You're a relatively new small business. You've been at it for 3 or 4 or 5, 6 years. You're doing everything right. You're paying your taxes. But it turns out, unbeknownst to you, you were calculating something incorrectly. The tax code can be complicated. Maybe it's something in your sales tax or whatever. And you get randomly audited, and they figure out that you were doing something wrong, and then all of a sudden, in one shot, you owe all of those back taxes with 18% interest plus penalties. And a hit like that can be absolutely devastating. The state of Washington offers essentially practice audits, like free tax counseling, where you as a new business can have the Department of Taxation come in, visit you, walk you through everything, memorialize it. If you are doing anything wrong, they'll tell you, and as long as you correct it, you're held harmless. So this prevents people from getting into trouble in the first place. It's very much like, if you're opening a restaurant and the Department of Health comes and does an inspection right at the beginning to make sure that you're doing everything right. It's the same concept except for taxes. So This is the first of our recommendations that has already become legislation, so thank you, Chair McEntee, for putting this in, and I know we have a hearing on it coming up later this week, so I look forward to continuing the conversation then. Again, low cost, easy, but would save a lot of headaches for a lot of small businesses.
Yes, and thank you for bringing that to my attention. So that bill's going to be heard Thursday in Finance, and I think it's a great idea. Oh, we have a question from Representative Caldwell.
It's not a question, it's a comment, because this is only my third year here in the General Assembly, and I have heard from several businesses in my district that this has happened to them in Rhode Island, and it has been incredibly damaging to them. So I think this is great. I think it would be really helpful to our small businesses, so thank you.
And the number of that bill is H6071, if anybody's following or wants to follow it. H6071.
Yes, Representative Cortland?
I'll just follow up on that and ask you the question since we're here. What about ongoing businesses? Because sometimes a business doesn't know what they don't know. And should it be, I guess my first question is, should it be limited to brand new businesses, or should we make every business have it be available to anybody? Because if they can correct some kind of bad practice they have, that's better for everybody.
Absolutely. So the version of the bill that's in now would, I think, make all businesses eligible to take advantage of the service. And I use new businesses as an example, but I think you're right. We would want to open it up to all of them. The other thing I would note is I haven't discussed it yet there's a brand new revenue director, but the previous revenue director we did meet with on it, and he did not think that it would require a lot in terms of additional staffing or resources to launch a program like this. Maybe like half an FTE is what he had told us. I don't want to speak for the new director, but again, a relatively modest expense for the state. Just a few more and then we'll wrap up. But staying in the tax lane, this next one may not seem like a big thing, but so many businesses have brought it up to me that I think I might as well get it out now. When you go to enter your sales taxes into the state system every month, in Rhode Island, you have to do the multiplication yourself of like multiplying your gross sales times the tax rate. Like other state websites, Massachusetts, Vermont, others, you don't have to do that. You just enter in your gross sales and it does the calculation for you. It's annoying, it's time consuming, but more important than that, this is the kind of thing that makes it easier for people to trip up, not realize that they've done something wrong, and then all of a sudden, years later, they owe 18% interest on that amount that was entered incorrectly. So hopefully, like actually putting a calculator that can do multiplication and division into the website shouldn't be too much of a lift, but would save a lot of headache for a lot of businesses. I have just two more. The Small Business Resource Center. So what you see on the screen, and I know it's hard to see, toward the bottom right there, Getting Started in Business, that is a manual that the Connecticut Economic Development Department has on their website. It's like a 50-page manual on how to start a business in Connecticut. Everything from incorporating, finding mentorship, finding access to capital, finding a location, licensing, permitting, all the rest, comprehensive. The one next to it, How to Start a Small Business in Massachusetts, same thing for Massachusetts. We looked, we couldn't find a How to Start a Business in Rhode Island manual on any state website. If it exists, we couldn't find it, and we were looking pretty hard. Similar with websites. Connecticut, Massachusetts, other states have centralized websites with really everything you need to know about how to start a business in their state. Rhode Island has some good resources, but not in a centralized one-stop shop sort of way. So the recommendation here is a simple one. We'll move to the next slide. There should be sort of a one-stop shop. If you go to the Commerce RI website now, start a business, you get a page that says Startup Assistance. It has links to some of the loan programs that Commerce offers, but not much else, besides this kind of form thing that you can enter to ask a question. The Secretary of State's website has some good resources, particularly on licensing and incorporation. But, the Secretary of State's website, you're not going to find information about loan programs. So having all of this information in one place would make things a lot easier, and having some sort of a manual where if you're, old-fashioned like I am in some ways and you want to print it out and actually have it, how to start a business in Rhode Island, I think would go a long way. One of the things on that, actually real quick, if you go back on that Connecticut website, you probably can't see it, but in the upper right corner there, that blue box is like a chat where you can talk to a live person in real time who can answer your questions. So having some sort of a resource like this in Rhode Island, I think makes a lot of sense. Finally, there's a longer conversation to be had about ways that we can lift up our minority-owned enterprises in Rhode Island. One that's been talked about a lot that I just want to highlight is increasing the utilization of minority business enterprises and state contracting. There is a real divide here. I showed you earlier how the pandemic has disproportionately affected minority-owned businesses. This, of course, was a problem, though, well before the pandemic and will be afterwards unless we're bold about taking corrective action. Nationally, 12% of Americans are black, but only 2% of businesses are black-owned. Revenue of black and brown-owned businesses is also significantly lower than that of white-owned businesses. Current state law in Rhode Island requires 10% utilization of women or minority business enterprises in state contracting. I think the time has come when those goals, those targets should be separated, and we should have stronger standards for both categories instead of lumping them together. It's doable. We're already exceeding that 10% threshold barely. I'm sure with some more work and some more emphasis and some more purposefulness, we can do better. But I think it starts with having a devoted target for use of minority-owned businesses in Rhode Island's state contracting. So I thank you again for the opportunity to present today. While these are challenging times for small businesses in Rhode Island, I do believe that we can bounce back, and we can bounce back in a way that is strong and broad-based and equitable, and rebuild a strong small business climate for Rhode Island. But it requires action. It's not going to happen by itself. If we just leave things to go to their own devices, then the Amazons and the Walmarts of the world are going to continue to scoop up this market share and take advantage of the struggles that small businesses are having. So it requires purposeful action to rebuild the small business economy in Rhode Island. That's why the work of this committee is so important, and that's why I look forward to working with you this year and beyond to help small businesses come back in our state. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer, and I'm sure there's some questions from the committee members. Anybody have any questions or comments? Representative Fenton Fung?
Great. Thank you, Treasurer. Excellent presentation and whatnot. I want to talk to you a little bit about the unemployment insurance fund. I know last year it was really, we were getting depleted. We were worried about it. We heard about it midsummer. What is the health of it right now? As we're talking to different small businesses in our district, they're petrified of what their tax might increase later on this year. And is there an opportunity to use some of the stimulus money to help maybe make that healthier if need be, to kind of take some pressure off the small businesses?
Yeah, you answered the question the same way I was going to answer it. So the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund has certainly gone down over the past year. It started COVID at roughly $500 million. It's down to $150 now. That being said, it's still in a much better place than it was during the financial crisis. So during the financial crisis, it actually went into deficit by more than $200 million. We had to borrow money from the federal government in order to make our payments at that time. So I think the answer, you're right, is to avoid having those automatic adjustments upward of the tax rate that funds the trust fund. It is an acceptable use of stimulus funding to backfill what's been spent in the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund, so we should do that.
I appreciate that. And then the other thing I'm hearing from small businesses is a lot of them here, and Mark Hayward, maybe you, I don't know who has the correct statistics. What percentage of our small businesses here are S-Corps or sole proprietorships? And again, probably you don't have that off the top of your head. I don't expect you to. But of course, they're taxed at a different rate. So some of them have come up to me and they're taxed like personal income. And so they're a little bit worried about this push this year to raise some of the income rates. They're like, of course, they're against it anyway, but like, this is definitely not the year to be pushing up our tax rate from 599 to, I believe, 899 is the push. Are you supportive of that generally? And how do you reconcile, that and whatnot? And what would you say to those small business owners that are fearful of that this year?
Yeah, I think what we should do is we should look at where the state's revenue and projected deficit stands. Like, as we get further into the spring, there's still a lot of moving pieces. The most important thing in my mind is we have to adequately fund education, workforce training, human services for people who are having a hard time, small business relief. We should see where we are in terms of the budget projections, but we have to fund those programs adequately. So let's see where we are when we get later into the spring. We see what the revenue projections look like. We see what the stimulus, ends up looking like in its final form. But, first steps first, let's see where we are, but we have to fund those key areas is what I would say.
I appreciate your answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we take any more questions, I just want to recognize that Representative Kazar is here, Representative Perez, Representative Slater, and Representative Price are all present. So if you would, Madam Clerk, check them in the present. We haven't voted on the holding for further study yet, so we'll do that in a bit. Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Kazar.
Thank you. Thank you, Treasurer. I really appreciate the innovation in the recommendations for emerging from the pandemic. A theme that I've been hearing from small businesses recently is that there are jobs available, but they're having trouble getting people to match the jobs, and especially without job fairs and sort of the usual way that we recruit staff for a variety of industries. It's actually been 3 very different types of businesses. It seems that once we start sort of having funds for businesses to work with, they're still going to be bumping up against this problem. Are there any pieces or any innovations we've seen from other states as to how this match happens? We know there's a increased unemployment rate, so any ideas on this?
Well, it's a good question. I think there's a number of reasons why it may be difficult for a business to find people to work for them, right? One is it might be a talent mismatch or a skills mismatch. And so continuing to invest in job training programs, particularly for those who've been laid off, whose jobs are not coming back, is absolutely vital. And that should be another priority use of the stimulus funding. I think the reality is there are some people who still just, don't feel good about going out again, because of the restrictions around COVID. And so hopefully as the vaccination rate continues to go up, that'll help as well. And then I know when it comes to matching, the Department of Labor and Training just last week, I believe, launched a new online resource to help match job seekers with employers. I'll be honest, it's new and I haven't really heard feedback yet about whether it's a good resource or not, but I agree, it's an issue.
Yeah, it is an issue because I'm hearing it down in my neck of the woods that the college kids who have been able to collect unemployment aren't necessarily wanting to go back to work, which we rely on them heavily in Narragansett and South Kingstown. So, and I love the URI kids, so I'm not giving them a bad rap, I hope, if anybody's listening out there. But, they're having trouble finding the summer help that they need for the anticipated, grand opening that we want to see happen this summer. So I don't know how we're going to get there, but thank you for the questions and the answers. Anybody else? Representative Courtfriend.
Thank you. You touched on the interest rate for people that are in arrears, businesses that are in arrears with their business taxes. Do you know where we are in relation to other states? That 18% seems really high, and I've heard people at I know at the business summit, small business summit, that's a complaint that comes up year after year. Where are we in relation to other states?
Yeah, I haven't seen a comprehensive review of how we compare to other states, but that has to be high, right? That rate has been in state law, as I understand it, for a number of years. at a time when interest rates generally have come down and inflation has come down. So I would think that relative to the cost of living, that's much higher now than it was intended to be when it was enacted. So, listen, I would love to see that 18% rate lowered. I would love to see, particularly relief for sort of first-time offenses, if we call it that. But, again, if those are seen as difficult things to do in terms of the long-term structural budget deficit, at the very least, the free counseling will hopefully help people from getting into trouble to begin with.
Right. Thank you.
Vice Chair Constantino.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. A couple of questions or comments. I love the idea of one-stop shopping, as you described it, and I think that maybe if you add a checklist of what needs to be done, and I don't know if you guys are thinking about that, but from start to finish, I think it'll help out immensely. And I want to comment, so 35 years ago, I came up with this idea of wanting to develop some property, and I had absolutely no capital. And the city of Providence had a program, and they would lend $125,000 without having to go to a bank, without having to provide credit, just, appearing in front of a committee with an idea, which I did. And it was a 10-year loan. The interest rate at that time was 3.25%. And I was able to secure that loan, and my idea ended up working. I paid the loan back, but it was a great program. And I'm wondering if your office would consider maybe taking a look at that program that was in place, because, even though you're working with banks and things of that nature, you still have to provide credit. You still have to provide capital, and, so the people that are out there that have these ideas, and they can't take the next step forward. I'm wondering if your office maybe could set up, within the office, a program that would allow somebody with an idea to come forward and then make their case, make their presentation, and maybe be able to secure a loan without having to jump through all the other hoops that you need to when you're dealing with banks and institutions.
Well, thank you, and again, recognizing your success as a small business owner, I certainly benefit from any advice that you would have to offer. I'd say I'd certainly be open to working with you to develop a concept. I'm not sure that it makes sense for the state to compete with the community banks and credit unions, but perhaps there are types of businesses or parts of the market that aren't being adequately addressed by the traditional banking system, and so developing a program to help those types of entrepreneurs or those types of businesses that are not being adequately served by the banking system might be, something that's worth looking at. And so I'd be happy to have a longer conversation with you about what possible models could look like.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairwoman.
Any other questions, comments? Representative Perez, why don't you have a seat over here so you can get on the microphone? Oh, there you go.
Actually, thank you, Chairwoman. Actually, I want to say something about what Ray Constantino said. I'm in small business too. And for business, they are already established. When they go to trying to get a loan, if the people don't have a credit, they just being rejected. Even all of you know that I'm a taxi owner, and you can see the line there before the pandemic, that you go by the train station, you see that full of taxis. Now you see nobody. Because most of those companies, even if they are established for 15, 20 years, when they go to apply, they check out their credit, and the credit is not good. So they just being forced to be out of business because no way they can go and get even a loan or a grant. Because when you apply for those, they require the credit.
You know, another interesting model that we've seen to help businesses get access to capital to get loans is collateral support. So when you go to the banks and the credit unions and you say, hey, show me a list of the last 20 loans you rejected and the reasons why, one of the most common reasons is lack of collateral, right? Somebody, you know, because oftentimes when you're just starting out, to get a small business loan, you need collateral, even for the SBA loans. And if you don't have the ability to use your house or your car or something else as collateral, then your loan's going to get rejected. And so one thing that some places have done that we could look at building out in Rhode Island is a collateral program where basically the state would set aside some money to serve as collateral for many, many, many different borrowers. That would make it easier for the banks and credit unions to approve the loans and also potentially incentivize them to approve loans that otherwise they wouldn't for people who don't have strong credit or something like that. It could be a way to help many times more businesses get loans ultimately than to have the state just give them out on a one-off basis. But that being said, I'm certainly open to exploring either concept.
Any other questions from the committee? Oh, go ahead. Representative Giraldo.
Thank you, Chairwoman, and thank you, Treasurer, for that great presentation. One of the questions that I had is, some of the recommendations that you presented, actually all of them are really great ideas. When I used to work for the city of Central Falls, one of the issues was getting the word out to our smaller mom and pop shops that aren't as tech savvy, that may not read the newspaper all the time. How would you envision taking some of these recommendations that you have and actually being able to get the word out to those small businesses that are minority owned and don't use the traditional types of media to get their information?
Yeah. What I found from our programs, like the Unclaimed Property Program and Crime Victims Compensation and other programs and out of our office, is it's very important to have trusted authorities in those communities who can assist with the outreach and sort of vouch for what you're saying, right? Because, you know, particularly for communities that in the past have been marginalized or haven't been directly engaged by government, you know, when all of a sudden someone from the government shows up and, you know, tries to say, hey, I know how to solve all your problems, there's going to be issues of trust, right? And understandably so. So I think having partners and validators in communities that are too often overlooked and are marginalized and are hard to reach is really important, because at the end of the day, I, as the state treasurer, can say whatever I want, but people are going to trust the person down the street who's been a mentor to them or who's, you know, somebody that they look up to and who they know. And so as a general outreach strategy, I think it's important for whether it's the Commerce Department or whoever is administering these programs, to have really strong relationships in the communities where they can find people who will be validators, is my sense. But you have more experience with this than I do, so I'd be interested to hear your thoughts as well.
I'd be happy to share that in another conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. I have one question for you, Mr. Treasurer. When you were talking about the minority contracts and separating the women from the people of color, I think that's what you're...
Yes.
So right now it's 10%. You say that we've reached that limit, and we're a little bit over that. I know there's legislation in to raise the amount to 25%, but for people of color, it's Chairwoman Williams has put in the bill to raise it to 25%, which I do agree with. I think we should go higher. But then she has a second bill that takes women out of the equation. Now, I'm hearing from a lot of women who are engineers, architects, contractors, and they're very opposed to this, because in that field, women are very much underrepresented. And, but what I think you're suggesting is divide the pot, which I think is a very interesting concept. We kind of discussed that the other night in labor. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, it's exactly that. I mean, listen, I think that it is important that the state engage with both women-owned and minority-owned businesses in its contracting. It's a way that the state can help boost those businesses that historically have had a hard time getting access to capital, getting an access to customers, getting access to equal treatment. And, I certainly agree with Representative Williams, and she and I have discussed this a number of times, that the threshold for businesses owned by people of color should be increased and can be. But I also think that it's a good idea to continue to have a separate threshold or goal or target for women-owned businesses too. I mean, listen, there are people in this room who maybe not in my lifetime, but in some of your lifetimes, when women couldn't take out a credit card without having their husband co-sign, right? I mean, this history
That's even
is...
before me, but
Yeah.
I don't know
Well,
if
but
anybody else.
50s, yeah, not that long ago. And so, there are still barriers for women-owned enterprises as well. So I would suggest not only raising the aggregate target, but actually separating them out into two separate thresholds would be my recommendation.
Any suggestions as to what percentage, like 10 and 10, or?
I'd want to have a conversation with some of the state agencies about that, and with ODOE, the agency that's in charge of enforcing these rules, to get their input on what they think an acceptable level or an appropriate level would be. But, certainly higher than 10%, and separate limits, I think, or separate targets, I think, is overdue.
Thank you. I think we have Representative Price is on the WebEx. Representative Price, do you have a question?
I do. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Well, thank you. Just have a question for the Treasurer Magaziner.
Yes.
I was just wondering if, with our new Governor McKean, have you had conversations, or the Treasury's Department had conversations with maybe lifting some of the executive orders or mandates that stifle the small businesses and let them, rather than having them get federal or state subsidies, let them get back to business and be successful on their own?
Yeah. Well, thank you for the question, Representative. I have had conversations with Governor McKee, in recent months and over the past year about ways to assist small businesses. We have not discussed the lifting of social distancing requirements, because I do believe that those decisions are best made by the public health experts, by the people who know how much has to be done and know more in order to slow the spread of the virus. That being said, I know that now that we're in the stage where vaccinations are becoming more widespread and case rates are coming down again, some restrictions have been lifted, and I expect that if we continue on this trajectory, most of the additional restrictions will be lifted, as we get into the spring and the summer.
So are you advocating for vaccines and lifting restrictions?
Well, I'm certainly advocating for vaccines, and I hope that everyone who is eligible to get one is signed up to get one. As far as restrictions go, as I said, I think that those decisions are best left to the public health experts, to Dr. Alexander Scott and her colleagues, and I trust their judgment.
So what do you think about lifting mandates on small businesses? I mean, I know you're talking about the health, everybody else deciding, but what do you think about it?
I think as soon as the public health conditions allow, then we should do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions or comments? Vice Chair Cortfriend.
Thank you. Thank you again. Do we have an entrepreneurship program for young people in the state? I was thinking about your how-to guides, and I know you're pushing financial literacy, but I wonder if we're talking to young people about entrepreneurship opportunities.
Yeah, there are some, certainly at the K through 12 level, there are some great programs that have emerged, both curricular programs and also extracurricular. And so particularly with like the pathway programs, I know that there are some school systems that have business and entrepreneurship pathways now that any Rhode Island student can access if their home district does not have it. So I'd be happy to follow up with more information about those. And you know, I've met a number of the educators who have designed those programs, and they're terrific and inspiring. And so, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Treasurer. This was a great, I think I speak for the entire committee that you did a great presentation. You filled our heads with lots of knowledge, and we know where to go to ask the questions.
Well, thank you.
And you are a champion for small business and improving the economy, so I very much appreciate all your hard work. So thank you for coming today. I know we took a lot of time, but
Well, thank you,
great
Madam
having
Chair. And you know, our whole team, we are available if you'd like to work together on any of the ideas we discussed today or on any others where we can be of help. And
Absolutely. That was one more question I wanted to ask. Is there, some of the recommendations that you had today, do you foresee legislation that you'd like to propose?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, as far as the stimulus funding goes, my sense is that the uses of those fundings, of that stimulus funding, will have to go through some sort of a legislative process. It's different from the CARES Act funding last year.
Right.
You know, the CARES Act funding was very specifically for emergency response, and so was left solely to the governor. This new round of stimulus funding, there's policy decisions involved, right? How much are we going to do for small business, for education, for healthcare, et cetera? And so I would anticipate that there'll be some legislative process that goes into that. And so when it comes to use of the stimulus funding, we'd be happy to work with you to help craft some programs if that's what you're interested in.
Oh, absolutely. I think everybody in here wants to help small business and do whatever we can to get through this next leap of faith to get everybody to where they used to be and better,
Yeah,
right?
for
The new
sure.
normal.
And then as for some of the others, aside from stimulus, my understanding is that SEA program, that unemployment program, is something that is already authorized under state law. It's just something where the DLT just needs to do it. But some of the other things, some of the tax ideas that we had in there could require legislation as well, and certainly be happy to work with you on any of that.
Great.
And on any of the other ideas that you may have.
Yeah,
So,
very good. Thank you.
all right. Thank you all very much, everybody. Appreciate it.
We want to recognize Representative Lauren Carson has just joined us. And before we go to our next speaker, I just want to hear a motion to hold all bills for further study.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, we have to do a roll call, right? Roll call, Madam Clerk? Please. Aye.
Aye.
Yeah, Tom. Thank you. Representative Corcoran.
Aye.
Representative Caldwell. Representative Carson.
Here, yes, aye.
Rep. Casimiro.
Aye.
Representative Diaz. Representative Fenton Fung.
Aye.
Representative Giraldo.
Aye.
Representative Perez. Yay or nay? Rep. Phillips.
Yes.
Rep. Price.
Yes.
Representative Franklin Vassal. Representative Slater.
Yes.
Did I miss you?
I think,
I'm so sorry.
that's okay.
Rep. Kassar.
Hi.
Thank you.
Now, our next guest, hold on a second, is the hospitality industry. We have three guests. We have Dale Ventatrini, who is President and CEO of the Rhode Island Hospitality Association. We have Sarah Bracco, Esquire, who is Vice President of Government Affairs of the Rhode Island Hospitality Association. And we have Mark Hayward, Director of Rhode Island District Office, United States Small Business Administration. Welcome. Are you with us? You still hanging in there?
Still hanging in here.
Good to see you, Dale.
Oh, thank you so much, Chairwoman.
And there's Sarah, and is Mark with us as well?
I am here as well, Madam Chair.
Welcome, Mark. Nice to see you. So please, you have the floor.
Well, thank you so much. I just want to say thank you, Madam Chair, and the members of the committee for allowing us to present today. And wow, that was worth the hour to listen to all of the suggestions. And honestly, I am so excited to and look forward to being part of rebuilding our small business community. You know, as an association, we represent a wide swath of the hospitality industry, but also we have so many trickle-down industries that affect us. And when we're not doing well, a lot of those people are not doing well, like our farmers and our fishermen and all of the suppliers. So this is very exciting to be able to talk to you about the effects that COVID has had on the industry, some of them very obvious, but also some suggestions, legislative suggestions that Sarah will cover. You know, the treasurer talked about the $25 billion that to restaurants in the federal package, and I'm proud to tell you that Sarah and I have been working with the National Restaurant Association on that very part of that bill. Many nights, weekends, and even early mornings. So we're excited to see something happen tomorrow, which is what we're hoping for. I know you recognize Sarah. She's going to be covering a major part of the presentation. She's our Senior VP of Advocacy, and of course, she's the General Counsel for the association. You know, COVID has forced us to go back to the drawing board and relearn, redesign our business models. Lots of conversations, lots of help needed, identifying some of the weaknesses that we had because things were going along well. Like some people didn't have a really big digital presence and needed help with technology, needed help with, a CPA, or needed help with crisis management. So those are a lot of the things that we went through in this last year and learned a lot. And out of that, we've become more efficient and more adaptable than ever. So we, as an association, have a 501c6. Our Hospitality Education Foundation is a 501c3. And in that foundation, we have a Hospitality Training Academy, which Sarah's going to cover about some trainings that we're doing, similar to what the treasurer brought up in some question that was asked earlier. We are the only official trade association for restaurants, hotels, and tourism in Rhode Island, and we serviced, through COVID, over 4,000 hospitality industry businesses throughout the state with our membership and education and advocacy. You know, our mission hasn't changed during COVID. It only got ramped up. You know, we've been considered the voice of the industry for over 64 years, and we found that our role was more important than ever. We made a decision very early on with the first week of when COVID hit, and not even thinking that it would be lasting this long. We thought of maybe a couple of weeks or a month or so. But we opened up our membership to everyone. Anyone we could find that had an email address, we started, and Sarah will cover some of the communications that we did every single day. But we included everyone in the industry so that we made sure that the industry in and of itself was whole and was supported. So, but our biggest challenge throughout the pandemic has been to balance the safety of our employees and the public, the economic needs of the industry, and then, of course, consumer confidence. We worked with everyone. We listed a few here: Governor's Office, Commerce RI, Department of Health. Department of Health we work with all the time anyway, pretty much weekly, sometimes daily. You know, the DBR, Division of Taxation, and even the municipalities. Early on, we reached out to many that were able to help us with either delayed payments or working out what they could in their own cities and towns, because they too were also suffering. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah. She's going to go through some of the things that we've done and what we need help with going forward. Sarah?
Thank you, Dale. And the timing worked out because my dog just stopped barking at the UPS man. So when we really look back over the last year, the first thing that always comes up is the just absolute economic devastation that has been felt by our industry. Pre-COVID, we were one of the top 5 industries in the state. And when we talk about our impact on the state of Rhode Island, it's not just financial, it's not just workforce. It was such an integral part of the very culture of what it means to live in Rhode Island. Our restaurant industry is why people stay here. Our wonderful tourism and hotel industry is why people come here on vacation. And so making sure that our industry is able to recover is important, not just because of its financial impact on the state, but also because it really defines what it means to live and be a Rhode Islander. But the financial status of our industry cannot be understated. In calendar year 2019, our industry collected almost $300 million in sales tax, meals tax, and hotel tax. That means that the state is just as invested in our success as we are. When we look at what that means in Rhode Island in 2020, when we fast forward, the numbers are pretty bad. In December, this is the first month of the so-called pause, our 1% meals and beverage tax was down 32.5%. Our December hotel tax was down over 60%. Nationwide, the food service industry lost $240 billion, and our recent sales data indicates that our industry has now entered into a double-dip recession. The first few months of COVID were very bad. The summer was okay, but then the fall was even worse than the original shutdown. And part of that was because people had gone through all of their savings. They had no more savings. They maxed out their credit cards. They remortgaged their home. And so when we started looking at how the industry reacted in March and April, when we thought that this was only going to be a 2 or 3 week shutdown, they started reacting much more strongly in the fall because of the fact that this had stretched on for so long. The workforce impact has been even worse. Pre-COVID, we employed over 86,000 people. That makes us one of the top employers in the state. According to the National Bureau of Labor Statistics, the hospitality and leisure industry has lost as many jobs as construction, government, manufacturing, retail, education, and health services combined. I don't think there's been any real winners in this COVID pandemic, but we are certainly one of the biggest losers when it comes to our impact on our workforce. In Rhode Island, we felt that even more. 96% of Rhode Island operators have been forced to lay off employees, and over 36,000 people have lost their jobs in the past year in our industry alone. When we talk about the personal side of this, I think we all have some specific stories that we can share from the last year, but I will never forget the day that our board found out that restaurants would be shut down, and right after that call, got a call from one of my board members telling me how many people he was about to lay off. And he said, I just don't know how to do this. I have been a successful business owner for years. I have never had to lay anybody off, and I just don't know what to do in this scenario. Luckily, we were very blessed that we had DLT and specifically Matt Weldon, who's now the acting director, who really took this as a challenge and was probably a daily participant in helping us navigate, particularly in those first few months. But there is such a very real human cost, not just obviously from the health perspective, but also from the workforce and employment side. In the midst of all of this, the Hospitality Association suffered its own loss when one of our longtime board members, Al Zanella, unexpectedly passed away. And it was in his honor that his family came to us and said, we want to honor Al, we want to honor the legacy of what he represented. And it was out of that we developed the Rhode Island Hospitality Employee Relief Fund. This fund is designed specifically for restaurant, hotel, and tourism employees who have been laid off because of COVID, and in the year since its inception raised enough money to help 668 industry workers. We are hopeful that this relief fund will survive past COVID and will be one of the positive things that came out of this pandemic as a long-term relief fund to help our industry's employees as they navigate some of life's challenges. As Dale briefly mentioned, we had to really redesign our industry communications right away. We started sending out what's now called the Daily Brief. It's gone through a few iterations. It started out as a 7-day-a-week industry newsletter until I think I called Dale, I said, I can't do it anymore. It's gotta go back down to 5. We now send this out 4 days a week, and it is very specifically designed to talk about COVID-related issues. We also host a weekly industry call in which we give updates, not just on what the governor announces that particular week, but also to give our members and our industry just an idea of what are some of the other challenges that are facing them. As Dale mentioned, we opened up our membership to all industry members, irrespective of whether or not they could pay our membership dues, and we launched a COVID-specific area of our website. Our goal was to make sure that not one person in our industry didn't have the information that they needed to make the decisions that they needed to make. Particularly when we look back over what happened last March and April, information was happening so quickly. And we would find something out, we would send it out, and 10 minutes later, we'd get an update. And so communication became an essential element of not just our advocacy, but also making sure that our industry had what they needed to do to be successful. We have always been a very partnership-driven organization, and that was only magnified during COVID. We worked closely with our national partners, the National Restaurant Association and the American Hotel and Lodging Association, not just on economic relief and helping our industry through the legislative process, but also to share ideas and best practices. I think I speak for everybody in the business community when saying that the Small Business Administration, particularly Mark Hayward, has been an absolute lifesaver. Mark has been just wonderful and always answers questions for us, and it has been a definite benefit to us here in Rhode Island that he has been here kind of certainly holding my hand as we go through the last year. We work very closely with the Rhode Island Business Coalition, which is made up of different chambers of commerce and trade associations throughout the state. And as always, we work very closely with our regional tourism partners who are some of the most brilliant minds that you will ever meet and have had to get really creative about how do you market tourism when tourism isn't supposed to be happening. And so we have a really great group of people that we use to share ideas and to troubleshoot with things that are hard to figure out. And the closeness of the Rhode Island business community has been very helpful throughout the last several months. Prior to COVID, we had a very robust technical assistance program. This was expanded dramatically. At the beginning and really throughout the entire process, our technical assistance focused on the reopening rules. They change frequently. They're not always the easiest to understand, and they require a lot of assistance so that the business has the resources that they need in order to implement them. We did a significant amount of training on how to properly handle COVID cases in the workplace. That ran the gamut from how to, obviously recognize the symptoms and signs of COVID, what to do if you have a potential exposure, how to handle customers that come in that might be sick or showing some signs of the virus. And so that took up a large part of what we focused on, including how do you implement employee testing and paid sick leave. We also focused on unemployment, PPP funding. We were very lucky that we had Mark at the SBA to help us during the first round of PPP, and then we had a private CPA firm that helped do one-on-one webinars with our members in order to help them get that PPP funding. But we also did a significant amount of training on things like takeout and delivery, marketing. Very unfortunately, we needed to do some heavy training on suicide awareness and mental health. And as always, our food safety training continued, and it became even more important than it usually is during COVID. Right from the beginning, REHA took the position that the only way that we would be successfully able to reopen in a safe way, in that way that Dale talked about, was to make sure that we had robust and free testing for employees. Over the spring and summer, we pushed very hard to get the asymptomatic testing expanded to hospitality employees, and then making sure that there was testing locations in places like Newport and South County. When we explained to the Department of Health that restaurant employees that work in Newport are not driving up to Providence to get tested, they're just not. And so we are very successfully able to expand that testing. And when we talk to our counterparts around the country, Rhode Island's easy access to testing is such a point of pride for us because it's such an essential aspect of how we were able to reopen. This past fall, we once again partnered with the Rhode Island Department of Health to implement the Buy Next Now rapid testing at employers' locations. So now you sign up for this program, you get a box of these testing kits, and you can actually test for COVID at your workplace. Our own office has implemented this program very successfully. It's not just open to hospitality businesses, but it is certainly an important aspect of how we are making sure that people remain safe while they are working. Along those same lines, we developed what we call our reopening pledges, both one for the hotels and another for the restaurants. And this was really focused on educating the public on what our industry was doing to keep them safe. Our industry is one of the most highly regulated industries out there. And even pre-COVID, there's a lot of rules when it comes to safely operating a restaurant and a hotel. And a lot of what this pledge was really highlighting what we've always done, highlighting our traditional cleaning procedures, highlighting the fact that our employees were constantly washing their hands, which seems so simple. But when we talk about making sure that people feel comfortable going out to eat, making that celebrated is an essential part of that. One of the chief things that we worked on was our economic relief programs. And I think from the day that we got shut down, really up until today and continuing on, we have been begging for more economic relief for our industry. The first iteration was the Restore RI program that started out at $15,000 per business, and due to our advocacy increased to up to $30,000. The hotel and tourism businesses could access what was called the HEART grant that also included what they called ESR grants that promoted COVID-safe activities. And then as we got towards the end of the year where we had our mini shutdown or pause, there was also other programs like the curfew grant and the pause grants. These have been an essential part of getting our industry through COVID. And I do credit the former Governor Raimondo and Commerce RI for being one of the leading states in the region. Mass and Connecticut look at our economic relief programs with a little bit of envy, I think, but that is not to say that it was enough, because there's never going to be enough direct aid to our industry right now because of the economic devastation that we are facing. One of, I think, the most fun programs that we worked on in the last year was the Take It Outside campaign. And I see Dale laughing because in the middle of it, I did not always think it was fun. But our entire office became a distribution site. We moved our operations to the Providence Marriott, where our chairman is the general manager and who very graciously let us take over. Well, Dale and I showed up there one day with about 120 pallets of blankets and said, "We're moving in, don't kick us out." And we distributed an amazing amount of products to our industry. 12,000 blankets, 370 heaters, thousands and thousands of hand warmers, jackets for staff, and a reimbursement program that came online a little bit later to help people expand their outdoor dining facilities. And the real purpose of this was part of what we called our Byo Blanket Campaign. Rhode Islanders tend to follow a pattern. They don't like to go out to eat before Memorial Day, and as soon as Columbus Day rolls around, they go back inside. But we started having these conversations in August and September saying, well, why can't we make that season a little bit longer? And so the Byo Blanket Campaign was born. Because of this program, people really got into it. And we saw people dining outside well into December. We were lucky that we had a relatively mild fall, but it really was about changing our mindset, about saying, well, sure, just put on a jacket, bring a blanket with you, and you can have a cocktail outside. And so this was a really fun program, not just to implement, but to see how much our restaurants and our hotels and our customers really embraced it. We have some great pictures here of particularly the jacket, which one of our restaurants customized as well with their logo, that really highlighted bringing this idea to the public. Particularly at the beginning of the reopening process, there was an absolute shortage of masks and hand sanitizer and disinfectant. We were able to distribute over 100,000 masks to our industry, and we partnered with other organizations around the state to help that distribution process. And particularly down in Newport, the Newport Chamber and Discover Newport were fantastic partners, making sure that our industry members on Aquidneck Island got access to that benefit. The most popular question that we get is, what do we need to recover? What is it going to take to get the hospitality industry here in Rhode Island back on its feet? And the first step is really recognizing where our challenges are. We need direct aid. We have been lobbying for months to have a Restaurant Relief Act in the federal relief program, and we're very hopeful that that makes it through the final process. But without direct aid, we simply will not have the working capital in order to reopen. We need to address consumer confidence. People are scared, and we understand that, and people need to make the best choices that they can make for themselves. I remember when I went out to dinner, I think the very first night I was able to, and it was a little weird. It was a little uncomfortable, and we have to build on that and reassure our consumer base that even though we went through this really horrible time, we reopened safely, we reopened smartly, and we're coming back in a way that makes sense. We are facing staffing shortages. We've lost 36,000 people in our industry, and not all of them are coming back. Some are not coming back because they have childcare shortages. Some are facing transportation challenges. Some are looking to get out of the industry because of what they've experienced in the last year in terms of the shutdown. But that is going to continue to be a significant challenge that we face in the coming months. The uncertainty is the real kicker here. Because in order to operate a business successfully, you need to have some form of predictability. And that has been the one thing that no one has been able to give us. We understood that as we navigated the beginning stages of the virus. But as the vaccine is here, people are starting to get vaccinated, we need to start putting together a long-term plan for how we're going to recover. But we also need to address rising operational costs. It costs more money to operate a business during COVID than pre-COVID, even though your capacity is down 25% or 50%. You're spending more on cleaning. You're spending more on supplies. You're spending more on food prices because those have also gone up. So even though people are saying, well, you're only operating at 25%, your costs must be down a little bit. They haven't. They've actually gone up. So the biggest thing that we are asking for when it comes to COVID relief is a long-term plan with clear metrics. We need to know when the convention center is coming back online. That is an absolute non-negotiable for us in order to move forward with our tourism and marketing programs. We need to make sure that our tourism funding has something that they can market. And the convention center being offline has been an absolute devastating thing to our market. Understandably so. No one's arguing that we needed it to go into a field hospital, but now that it's no longer being used, we need to have specific dates when it comes back online so that we know we can start marketing it. On the restaurant side, we need to know where we're going to be. We need to know what metric the state needs to meet in order to remove all restrictions. Not saying it needs to be one, not saying that we need a specific date, but we need a goal to work forward to so that we know, all right, when we're getting to this point, we know we're reaching an area where we're not going to be operating under COVID restrictions any longer. We also need to look at building policies that help us build a better future. Things like alcohol to go would have been not even on the table 3 years ago, but now the House just passed this last week and is going to be a major help to us. Things like regulating third-party delivery companies was a priority of ours prior to COVID, but that need has only been magnified because of our reliance on delivery during COVID. We've been working with Chairwoman McEntee on municipal issues and how do we take the energy of the municipalities just allowing us to dine outside and make that a permanent feature. I will be the first one to say when we talked about expanding outdoor dining, I was concerned because I was concerned about how the municipalities were going to react. They were wonderful. They just opened up. They made it easy. Why can't we do that all the time and make that a permanent feature of how we do business in the state? I know the Treasurer Magaziner talked about the 18% tax penalty reform. This is huge for us because we have not all been able to pay our taxes because we simply didn't have the cash to do so. Rhode Island has the highest tax penalty rate in the country. It is one of those things that makes us an absolute outlier when it comes to doing business here, and we hope that the General Assembly can figure out a way to financially do this year. It's always been an issue, but because of the financial hardship that we have felt this past year, it's more important than ever. We also are asking for a pause on new mandates. This year has been hard, and we know that we are going to lose a significant amount of our industry this year, despite all of our efforts, because they simply cannot afford to continue to do business here. So we're asking that before we have to take on new mandates, we're given a little bit of a break in order to get our feet back from underneath us. So with that, Dale, I will hand that back on over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. Dale, are you with us?
No one usually has to tell me to unmute myself, right? Here I am, muted.
We didn't think so. We don't know you to be that way.
I know,
Welcome
exactly,
back.
right? But, you know, when we surveyed our members and the industry, actually, and also we participated in surveys with our national organizations, it was reported back that 78% of our operators had made charitable contributions to their community. I think you all saw that. You saw that in your own communities. You saw that our industry was delivering food to the first responders. Our hotels opened up for first responders and the like. The industry continues to be very giving, regardless of how hurt they may have been. They found a way to give back to their community. We're available. I'm so excited. I keep saying that wow word because after hearing the treasurer and hearing what you're doing, Chairwoman, and listening to all of us and all the different aspects of what we have to look forward to, we want to be available to you. And again, you know, our partner in crime, Mark Haywood, I know he's coming up next. He has been so supportive of finding out ways, even out of his own purview, and coming back with other suggestions. So I think the one thing I'd like to close with, our association has always called itself a culture of community. We have, you know, we put all these C's together of collaboration and communication and the like. But during COVID, our community grew. It grew so large. It didn't matter who you went to speak to. Many of you on the committee, a lot of different people we went to ask for help, and you were right there for us. Different organizations, partnering, you know, some obvious ones that, you know, we tend to go and do our work every day and know that people are over there, they can be there. But now it's been done with intent. So I'm so proud to be here in Rhode Island. I'm proud to see where we're going with this. I'm proud to be part of what you've asked us to be here, Chairwoman, and the committee, because I know that we can survive this. We have not had a wholesale closing of restaurants and hotels. We have not as of right now. We've been very lucky compared to some other states. But we know we're going to need help. We're going to need help with, you know, teaching people on technology, crisis planning, you know, website development, having a bigger digital presence. We did not know, and I started with my conversation at the beginning, we did not know how many people didn't have access to this or didn't think they needed to. So those are some of our goals as well, and I heard the treasurer say the same. So we're at your service here, and I look forward to anything that we can do to work with you.
Thank you, Dale. Any questions from members of the committee? Anybody on? Sarah had like 6 recommendations that I saw, and I know the alcohol to go is already a bill that's in the process. I know there's one about the third-party delivery that's in the process. My municipal government moratorium for small business will be filed tomorrow. The last 3 are the 18% tax penalty reform, which I believe the treasurer already spoke about. We'll look into that as a potential legislation. We need to get moving on this. It's already in? It's already been heard. Who put that one in? You did. Well, we already have that one in. Representative Phillips put that one in. And that's giving the pause to the penalty?
No, it's the one that lowers the 18% to prime plus 6%.
And that's permanently?
That's going to be permanent, prime plus 6%, unless somebody wants to go prime plus 5, but I think that's palatable for most businesses, if I'm not mistaken, right, Dale? You're muted still.
Unmute yourself.
I know. I mean, Sarah's usually in control of muting me, just so you know, and she does it well. Yes, wow, thank you so much, Rep. That is terrific to hear.
Great, yeah, that is good. I know that the treasurer was talking about a 18% pause on the penalty, pause on the penalty for late payment through the summer, I believe, right? So that might be something someone in the committee should put in. And what about the common sense liquor reform? I didn't quite get that. What were you looking for on that?
So this is part of a project that we have been working on for several years, and there's no one specific thing. We have been taking an overall review of our liquor laws and looking at things that are just outdated and unenforced and getting them off the books. So one of the bills that we have this year, and I believe Rep. Hawkins has it over on the House side, is allowing restaurants to stop serving food after 10 p.m. No one enforces it. Everyone does it. So why is it still on the books? So we're looking at these types of things that just make it a little bit easier to do business. As another example that we worked on a few years ago was allowing restaurants to serve alcohol before noon on Sundays. We've all had Bloody Marys. We were all doing it, but it was just an old law in the books. And so we tried to pick one or two laws a year that we're going to do that review on. And so this is just part of our overall advocacy strategy. We have been very lucky because we have such incredible access to our General Assembly, and you have all been so wonderful listening to our concerns and trying to find creative ways to help us. And so it's nice to be able to say, here's what we need, and they're already all in legislation already. It's just a matter of getting those things across the finish line to make sure that they actually make it into law. So thank you for all of you who have sponsored our legislation on that. It's been wonderful that we've been able to do that.
Thank you, Sarah. And the pause on new mandates means don't put any more bills in that require new mandates. I'm guessing.
Yes, please.
That's don't act.
Just give us a year because we need to get back on our feet.
Absolutely.
It really is. You know, we did some surveying about, the start and stop, where we've had to close or we had to reduce capacity, or some people chose to go into hibernation. The cost could be up to $30,000 to reopen. So these are the kinds of things that we need to just say, give us a little bit of time and to get back at the table. One very important thing, Madam Chair, is that the meals and beverage tax and the 1% meals and beverage and the extra 1% hotel tax goes back to the municipalities. Right. So they're a partner with us as well. They want to build that revenue back up as we reopen. So that's the nice part about all the symbiotic relationships that we build, is people finding out that, whoa, wait a minute, we are important to the community.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, we have a question from Representative Fenton Fung.
Hi, Dale. How you doing?
Hi.
Thanks for your wonderful presentation. And I think what you and Sarah did well was that you really talked about everything that went right and everything that the industry really stepped up on. As one of the first responders that got many meals from local restaurants, I can't thank them enough.
Wow.
What was the one, if you can name one, two, doesn't matter, what were some of the big things that state government did wrong, got in your way, and you would say, please don't do that again?
Well, honestly, I'm not sure that I can pick one. I think it was the fact that none of us knew where we were going. So we were all trying to figure it out together. And boy, that's a hard question because we were always in communication. I'm talking 7 days a week, sometimes very late at night, very early in the morning. Did we always like everything? No, but we always felt listened to. So I don't know, Sarah, can you help on this? Nothing stands out to me that's so glaring. I think now, in retrospect, looking at the granting program, we could have done some things a little bit different, and we're hoping to be, talk about a little bit about that. But I don't know. Maybe I'm having a good day today. I can't think of. I'm sure we've been in a little bit of hell. I'll have to say that. I probably shouldn't swear, but I should say that. Days where we took hundreds of phone calls because people just needed to talk to us. But Sarah, help me out here.
I think the challenge that we all went through was none of us have gone through a pandemic before. So we were all learning as we were going. And it's not necessarily something that went wrong, but it was, I think, indicative of how quickly things were moving, is that as things got rolled out, they got rolled out without necessarily all of the questions being answered. And so we have worked very closely with the state trying to mitigate that as much as possible. And it will never be perfect. I think Mark will be able to tell you about how many final rules the PPP had. It was like every day was a new interim final rule, which added a lot of stress to the process. But I don't know if there was a way of perfectly avoiding that, because once again, I have never lived through a pandemic before. I hope I never have to again, and no one else was. So we were sometimes moving so quickly that not all of the answers were there, but we ended up always getting them within a few days.
Yeah, I think that was a common criticism or complaint and whatnot of many different leaders, municipal and whatnot, on the same thing. And like you said, everything's moving at once, and there is no playbook for this. And so we were kind of writing it as we were going, for sure. I like, Sarah, kind of what you said too, is that, we finally got those answers. And when things move so much, I really worry about some of our businesses where English is not a native language, okay? So we have lots of restaurants Hispanic startups, we're talking about Vietnamese restaurants. One of the things that I kind of noticed just from people reaching out is there wasn't enough translation going on, okay? What the PPP rules, this is just a broad criticism of the federal, state, local responses, that we really don't have enough targeted impact and targeted language direct impact to some of these minority businesses, especially restaurants, like you said, where things were moving so fast. My husband grew up in a Chinese restaurant. A lot of immigrants come to this country and they share their wonderful foods and restaurants. And I think that's one of the things that we got to look on how we can do this better. And as we get this next stimulus package coming out, and as we have these grant programs, what are we doing to be very targeted and direct in helping them as much as possible, okay? English is a second language for many of them. They do very well. I'm thinking of a certain restaurant in my head right now. Speaks English very well, conversationally and whatnot, but to handle the financial aspects and their fear of screwing up a grant application and then being held liable prevented them from even going after that grant. So I'd love to see whether it's your organization or different restaurant organizations right here and seeing what we can do to really help those special businesses, because I think that was one area that we noticed, especially in the urban core where things started to fall apart. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Dale, for your presentation. Lauren Carson has a question. Representative Carson.
Yeah, actually, thank you, Chairwoman. I wanted to make a comment because when Sarah just commented about the difficulty of operating in sort of a quick, fast-paced changing environment and not having all the information, some of you may remember that 2 years ago, Newport had a gas outage for a week. And we had no power, and people had no heat, and everybody had to pull together. And I often said in the last year that helped Newport through this crisis because we had already been through a crisis. So I'm not suggesting we go through another one of these, but clearly the stuff that you've learned, how to respond, all the techniques, all the mechanisms, next time, God forbid, we have something that is this global, right? You'll be able to get up a lot quicker. You'll see that. So, and I'm a big advocate of evaluating what we've been through. I'm a big advocate of saying, okay, what went right during COVID? What lessons have we learned? How did we make lemonade out of these lemons? And really having that conversation so that we can take advantage of the things we learned and really take advantage of the new opportunities that are presenting themselves. And we can change the things that never worked to begin with, which I hear you saying you want to do. And we can be more prepared for the next time. So that's a very worthwhile conversation to have.
Thank you, Representative Carson. And with that, I believe it's time to move on to Mark Haywood. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I think more than anything else is I just want to throw out some numbers, and no, I don't have a formal presentation, but I do want to give members of the committee the opportunity to ask questions, because I know I get a lot, as Dale says, I get a lot of questions. We deal with approximately 200 to 300 people on a daily basis, myself and the rest of the district office. And we're trying to field the questions to the best of our ability. And I will tell you that there are some very difficult areas that we go through. But 99% of all business here in the state of Rhode Island is small by SBA standards. And it's been talked about the fact that 52%, I actually think it's higher. Our numbers indicate that approximately 54% of the workforce currently works for small business. So it's really important to understand the impact that small businesses have here in the state of Rhode Island. And the great thing about the Paycheck Protection Program, it was to give dollars to the small business community for them to bring their employees back onto the payroll and to try to avert some of the issues. And I have to say, both Sarah and Dale mentioned it. Matt Weldon over at DLT, he has been absolutely phenomenal. And we've had a great relationship with Matt. Matt and I speak on a daily basis. I also speak to the state police on a daily basis, but that's a different issue. But basically, 18,000 small business loans was done for $1.9 billion in the first round. That ended in August. And then when PPP round 2 came in, we have done approximately, and I can tell you exactly as of this morning, we have done 8,572 loans for $717 million. If you add the two together, basically what we're talking about is 26,000 loans for $2.6 billion that are forgivable loans. This is getting cash into the economic system that we know, and it also provides for safety, soundness, and security for the small business community. The General Treasurer also mentioned the fact that we've done approximately 11,000 loans for about $572 million for economic injury disaster loans. And economic injury disaster loans, they are actually loans. The PPP can be forgiven. The economic injury disaster loans really is to replace working capital on a long-term basis to allow people to have, and we know of a lot of people who got the loan, they put it in the bank and it's still sitting there as they're working through their cash through the PPP. Having said that, we did some statistical analysis actually on Friday, so it's a little bit less than the number from the $717 million. But when you look at in this second round, where is the money going? Accommodation and food services, there were 1,087 loans, or 13% of all the loans that were given for $163 million. The percentage of money is 23%. That's in the second round of PPP. When we looked at the national statistics, Rhode Island the percentages are much higher into the hospitality industry in round 2 than it is from a national perspective, which is merely at 18%. So I think it shows you the heavy concentration that we have here in the state of Rhode Island. Now, I do know that there are a lot of ancillary businesses that support our hospitality industry. We have been working diligently with the S corporations, with the independent contractors, and with the sole proprietors on, for example, fishing boats. Because the way fishing boats are looked at from a short and long-term perspective, it's a little bit different. And I know that the president announced, and we have changed our policy as it relates to sole proprietors and independent contractors. It also really goes back to the relation that approximately 60% of all sole proprietors, independent contractors are either women or individuals of color. And I think so we have been working over the last few days to target and ensure that this particular sector they're getting the money that they absolutely need in order not only to survive, but to thrive long term. I want to associate myself with everything that was said by the General Treasurer and as well as Sarah. I think they provided an excellent presentation. A couple of things that I do want to make clear. One, the Small Business Administration 7A program, which is where the PPP loans come from, but just the 7A program in general. We're not a collateral lender. We're a cash flow lender. We don't normally take collateral if it's $350,000 or less, if it's not there. And certainly, I think people need to recognize the fact that under the rules and the IFRs that we've had for the PPP program, very specific. It says we're not taking individual guarantees, we're not taking collateral. We're going based upon the word of the individuals who are, filing for the particular loans. We're holding harmless the banks. So it really is a liquidity issue to get the liquidity into the community, and that's essentially what's happened. The general treasurer, and I think Sarah or Dale did, talked about SEA. The funny thing about giving people the ability to start a business and still collect unemployment was something that the U.S. Small Business Administration did with DLT years ago. I think that may have been the reason why there was an amendment to the act to allow that to happen. But I think listen, we work every day, every week, every hour that we're sitting here to try to get people into business. But I think the most critical part of that is not to encourage people to get into business or to start a business without giving some kind of technical assistance. And I will be very candid with you that the program that we had through the Center for Women in Enterprise, which basically married a whole program where we talked about what is a business plan, what are financial statements, and getting individuals to understand what the basics of business actually is, and then to get them to the point where we help them finance that particular business, and they collected their unemployment through. We had a tremendous amount of success with that particular program. And I agree with the treasurer and with Sarah and with Dale that we need to continue to encourage that. But at the same time, if we're going to encourage individuals to get into business, I would continue to encourage a requirement that they be tied to technical assistance, because we have the Small Business Development Center, which is headquartered at the University of Rhode Island, which is supported by the state, approximately over $2 million, which is provided by the SBA and the federal taxpayers. We have the Center for Women in Enterprise, which is one of the best women's centers in the country. We have the Veterans Business Outreach Center here located in Providence. And then we have SCORE. SCORE used to be called the Service Corps of Retired Executives, but actually the individuals, most of them are not retired. They're still active in their own businesses, but they volunteer their time and they provide counseling and training to the small people who want to get into business and people who are already in business. And I will tell you, they are a godsend here in Rhode Island. We have approximately 60 SCORE volunteers led by Rochelle Blees, and and Jim Munchner, and they do an absolutely great job in leading those individuals and just helping everyone. Madam Chair, I could go on, and I know the time is late, 6 o'clock, and I want to give an opportunity for questions in case any members of the committee. And it's always a pleasure to appear before you, and I would be happy to do that at any time in the future.
Thank you so much, Mark. I want to make sure everyone knows that Mark Haywood is Director of Rhode Island District Office, U.S. Small Business Administration. Any questions from any members of the committee? Representative Fenton Fung.
Hi, Mark. Thanks again for all you do. You guys have been a godsend during the pandemic. I have a question. When we're talking about the next round of stimulus aid, there was a little bit of confusion how different states handled like the PPP loans and some of their grant programs. Are any of these programs, as you're seeing them come out, and I know that it's a fluid mechanism here, are any of these eligible to be taxed? And we don't want that, of course, is what I'm saying. Is that these grant recipients, these program recipients, should they be understanding that some of these will come back to, get them next year as far as tax burden?
Yeah, as far as the federal PPP goes, we know that it is not taxed. The assistance that's been provided, I've had discussions with the Rhode Island Taxing Authority, and they have made a request to the SBA to get a listing of all the individuals who got the PPP loans so that they make sure that they do not tax. It's not, and I know that there have been some questions. I don't know if Dale or Sarah, I don't know if Sarah's still on, but whether or not they've had issues. But I do know that there's been some discussions about things that have been actually provided to the small business community, and Dale and I had a discussion not that long ago about the fact that the blankets that were provided may be considered to be taxable. And I really don't think that we want to get into that position right now. I think we need to help the business community as much as we can. And I do believe that if we can get over that, Representative Fenton Fung, I think that would be in the best interest of not only the state, but also in the best interest of the small business. We got to get by this. We got to get by this.
Yeah, I mean, my take on it is if for some reason some of this is taxable, let's make sure it's not. You know what I mean? Like, what do we have to do to make sure that these guys get as much relief up front? And then, you know, seeing how to reform the taxes on them long term. This has been an industry, and small businesses overall get hit with many, many different fees and taxes that probably make us outliers, definitely in the region. So, you know, like I said, I think there's been some confusion in the community about what's taxable, what's not, and I think how different states handled it also raised everybody's anxiety level. So I think as we roll out the next one, I think really clear communication is going to be key, and I think really helpful to make sure this goes well. Thank you.
Dale, did you want to chime in on that one?
No, I think you covered it well. You covered it well, Mark, and thank you for bringing it up.
Yes, any other questions? Vice Chair Constantino.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Hi, Mark.
How are you, sir?
Very good, thank you. Quick question on forgiveness. So what I'm hearing from a lot of small businesses is that they applied for the first loan, and then the second loan came out, but the forgiveness portion was kind of in the works. And I know that SBA has changed the requirements on loan amounts from $150,000 and less I guess they changed it to a short form situation. So my question to you is, once the bank gets the information on forgiveness and then they send it over to the SBA, what's the timeline for the SBA to forgive loans on the first, portion of the PPP funds?
Yeah, and Representative, I can provide that to you. But I will tell you that for the loans that are over $150,000 and up to $2, $3, $4, $5, $10 million, those loans are certainly taking more than 90 days. And we do know that there are some that have been caught into that because the forgiveness portal that's being uploaded by the local lenders is now being sent to Herndon, Virginia, which is one of the processing centers, and it's taken longer than what we initially anticipated. But I will tell you that on the other side of that, if the real small loans are coming back very quickly, and I think the change to allow for $150,000 and less to take the express form is going to make life a lot easier. And we want to make sure that these loans are forgiven. That's why we tell the lenders up front, get the information up front, because we don't want to be in the position where we're going to tell someone, oh, you're going to have a $3,000 loan at 1% for the next 5 years. It's not good for the bank, and it's certainly not good for the borrower, because they were expecting it to be forgiven. I think a lot of those issues, Greg, have really been resolved by virtue of the legislation that was signed on December the 27th.
Great, and thank you so much for all your help. You saved a lot of small businesses in the state of Rhode Island. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you, Mark. Thank you for your great presentation, and I'm sure we all will have a lot more questions, and maybe we'll get in contact with you directly, if that's okay.
Yes, Madam Chair, at any time we stand ready to help and assist. And my plea to all of you and my plea to the state is this is a liquidity issue on behalf of small business. If we're going to do grant programs, I think we need to make them as easy as possible and to get that money into the hands of the small business community.
We couldn't agree with you more. Thank you very much. And with that, we'll go on to our calendar. The first bill that's scheduled for our hearing is House Bill 5457. It's sponsored by Terry Cortrand. It's entitled An Act Relating to Taxation, State Tax Officials, Sales and Use Taxes, Enforcement and Collection. Our sponsor is here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is perfect timing after all the discussion we've had earlier today. This bill is pretty simple. It allows the Division of Taxation, well, it allows a business person until midnight to pay their taxes. Because right now, there's two different portals that the Division of Taxation is working on, the older one and a newer portal. And the older one actually says on it that if you make your payment after 4:30, you will receive a penalty and the fines start accruing at 4:30. And I just think that's, as a small business owner myself, I've been caught in this multiple times. And I think small business people, a lot of times they're working, helping customers, and they're working at their business during the day, and they do a lot of that paperwork in the evening. So I think it would be a big help to businesses to at least give people to the end of the day, like when you file your taxes, you have till midnight. Now, the new portal, I don't find that. And I did talk to the Division of Taxation, and they say that they are being more flexible, but they have not technically changed this rule, but they did, I was glad to hear, say that they have made some modifications to their software so that they're not issuing those penalties if it's paid on the same day. But I don't think that change has been made official. So, and I would, when I spoke to the Division of Taxation, I asked them to come to one of our meetings and to tell us exactly what they are doing, and I think that would be a good conversation to have, and maybe we can cheer for Rep. Phillips' bill while, when they come.
Well, thank you, Representative, and I think it's a great bill. I know Vice Chair Constantino has something to say.
I just want to add that I think it's a terrific bill. You know, I'm an owner of multiple businesses, and I've been caught in the same situation that you have been caught in. I think that maybe, and I don't know if you're open to this, but I would love to see the 24-hour maybe go to like a week's time or something, or 5 days, just because you're so busy with your business and, you know, you're self-employed. You just, sometimes these things get by you. And, you know, once you miss the deadline, you know, that 18% starts, you know, the clock starts running on the 18% in penalties. So I think this is a wonderful bill.
Thank you. You're right. Years ago, you used to be able to send a letter in and ask for forgiveness, and you would get a response. And now if you write one of those letters, it's crickets. You never hear back. So I
Forget
would
about
totally
it, as they say, right?
Right. I would be totally open to that flexibility.
Representative Caldwell.
Thank you. I also agree this is a great bill, and I would love to see the Division of Taxation come and give us a presentation and allow themselves to open up for a question and answer about some of these issues. Along Greg's lines, although this would make it very different. So my husband is a small business owner, and he always has a problem because some of his taxes can be paid online and some of them cannot. So I would love to see a bill that said you could pay them up until midnight and they could all be paid online through the portal, rather than some of them having to be printing out a form and mailing it, and some of them done online. So I think this is a great start to talking about that process as a whole.
Good ideas. Lauren Carson, Representative Carson.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Yeah, I've worked with Terry on this bill because this happened to a constituent business of mine. It was a big business who pays a lot of taxes, and they got snagged for like a couple $1,000 just because they filed their report 4 or 5 hours late. So I'm a big proponent of this. But I have a question for the sponsor. When you spoke to taxation about this issue, did they indicate, or did you ask whether or not it's on their webpage that the deadline is 4:30?
I went looking for it last night, so it's definitely on the older version of the website that you can still use. on the on the newer portal, I don't see it anywhere there. And she did not indicate that it was there because she said that they were making this change, but it's not really a public change. It's
pretty public
just
to me.
more confusing for businesses instead of being straightforward.
Thank you, thank you.
I think you have a lot of support here, Terry, so, great bill. That concludes, we have no witnesses tonight. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 5457. Next is House Bill 5758, which I have sponsored. It's an act relating to food and drugs. It's Sanitation and Food Establishments Home Food Manufacturers Act. It amends the current law that allows farmers to sell produce directly to consumers by directing the Department of Health to permit home food manufacture and sales direct to consumers. Now, this bill, we've had a lot of discussion. I know that Terry and Lauren, Representative Cortfrin and Representative Carson have been involved in conversations regarding this bill, and we have tons of testimony. We have well over 100 emails in support. I believe we got another 50 today that were too late for the deadline, but those will be posted tomorrow. But we also have nine people who want to testify. So if we could have the first caller, they're going to be able to explain this much better than I am, although I do have a handle on it, just so you all know. Oh, yes, and everybody, we only have a little bit of time left in this room because we have a meeting scheduled right after us, so if we could keep it to, if the witnesses can keep it to 3 minutes, that would be great. So the first person on the phone is Kara Donovan. Kara, are you with us?
I am.
So Kara, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Chairwoman McEntee and members of the committee for the opportunity to testify for the Home Food Manufacturer Act. I live in Portsmouth with my husband and my 4 children. When my oldest son turned 1, it was very important to me to bake his first birthday cake. We all still look at the photo and laugh about how amateur it seems and how hard it was for me to decorate and bake it, but I still kept at it every year for each of my children and eventually began to really love baking and decorating. Soon I began baking for family and friends who would ask, and each time I got better and better and started experimenting with cookies and cupcakes as well. All this experimenting turned into my passion, and for a while it also offered me the opportunity to make a little bit of extra money for my family while still being able to be home with my children. I knew that someday I would like to take my passion and turn it into a legitimate business. Over the years, I've looked into renting kitchen space from Incubator Kitchens, but their fees and my lack of time have always kept me from making the leap. I just wasn't able to find the necessary hours away from my home. Paying for childcare, rental and storage fees, and membership fees would all leave me having to charge an astronomical amount for my end product. And in the long run, I knew that my business would not have survived. In the end, I kept baking from home until I received a violation from the Department of Health. I've never liked doing the wrong thing by not following our state's cottage food law, so once I received the violation, I stopped baking for others. It was at this time that I decided to try and help change our state's current law. Changing HB 5758 would be life-changing for me and my family, as I know it would for so many other Rhode Islanders. Over the last few weeks, many people from Rhode Island have reached out to me in support of changing our cottage food law. I've spoken with people who are honestly thinking about moving their businesses to another state because of how difficult it is here to run a food processing business. I heard a story about a successful baker who relocated to Vermont because they couldn't keep up with costs and did not have the option to work out of their residential kitchen. This is also heartbreaking to me, especially in light of COVID, when so many people have lost their jobs and are just looking for additional ways to make ends meet. So many moms and dads now need to be readily available for their children to be home from school due to distance learning requirements, and many rules are being adjusted in other industries, allowing people the ability to work from home. With 48 other states paving the way for home food processors, I am hoping Rhode Island can be added to the list of states who are changing the rules for home food producers. Changing HB 5758 will bring more jobs to our state, provide fresh, homemade, non-hazardous food options to our communities, as well as allow for entrepreneurship where there would otherwise be none. I have to thank you all once again, and Chairwoman McEntee and members of the committee for having me here tonight, giving me the opportunity to testify, and for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Kara. Any questions from the committee members? Hearing none, our next witness is David Dakian, and he's from Eat Drink, Rhode Island. Hi, David, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, David, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time today, Representatives. Thank you for taking up this bill. I was thrilled to see this bill taken up this year. This is something that I'd love to see for a long time now. My business is working with food businesses. I run Eat Drink Rhode Island. I work with a lot of small food businesses across the state, many manufacturing some of the products that everyone's known become very popular. Rhode Island's become very popular for, and everyone's come to love. And to see those businesses start, this would be a key moment for a lot of new businesses to come along and join those businesses. All the things that the previous caller listed, she was very eloquent about all the economic benefits and all those things. I want to speak to a few more specific points because I'm sure, like you said, 150 pieces of testimony, you've got lots of information to pour through. But the key is we're the only other state besides New Jersey that doesn't have this. And with Massachusetts extending having this cottage food law, it's an opportunity for all sorts of businesses to leave this state. And not just into Massachusetts, Connecticut, anywhere, but seeing as how we're such a small state and that's a possibility all the time, it's easy. The technology and the means that people have at home in their kitchens now, safety-wise, health-wise, has improved dramatically over the last 10 years, let alone 20, 30 years. Home dishwashers all reach sanitation temperatures. Home ovens all reach the necessary temperatures to bake properly. There are tools such as immersion circulators and vacuum sealing machines that are really inexpensive, that sub $100 in some cases, that people have access to that they never had access to before in the past. The playing field has been leveled here, except in the case of this requirement for a commercial kitchen. And that cost is just a burden that a small person at home who's trying to start something new, who may be experimenting and not even know if they can start a new business, really can't afford to have. And on top of all that, the other thing that I really wanted to highlight this evening is that this is a huge means of access for women and minority-owned businesses. The number of immigrants from around the world that come to Rhode Island and want to have their food culture and the things that they love produced here is huge. I hear this all the time, and it's fantastic to see, and it's amazing that we get that culture here, and to have this opportunity for them would be phenomenal. It would just be a huge growth for women and minority-owned businesses to have this access. Women, specifically, as our last caller just mentioned, she's home with her kids. That's an opportunity that she wouldn't have had otherwise. Yes, I understand the challenges and the opposition that's going to come about, but really the key here is the people who start these businesses either want to keep them small and keep them, very artisan and in their home and not come up against any of the hurdles that may be involved in a larger commercial operation, or they do want to do that and they're going to move out of their home and then they'll move into a larger commercial operation. So, we're not looking at, people having lines of cars at their home and things of that nature. I mean, there's obviously, neighborhoods and zoning laws and things of that nature to restrain those types of things. We're looking at people that want to create something new, want to bring something to their neighbors and their consumers around them because they love a product. And this is a way of an opportunity of having to do it. And again, I'm just going to keep stressing that the one thing that just is, boggles my mind for years and years and years. We're one of only 2 states in the entire country, and one of the few places in the world, to be quite honestly, with you, that doesn't have these types of laws. And things like that shouldn't happen anymore.
Well, thank you very much,
David. For your time.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
The next everybody just please try and keep it to 3 minutes because we are under the gun to get the next group in here. And I appreciate everyone's time. The next witness is Ellen Hamlet from the Institute for Justice. Ellen, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Chairwoman McEntee and members of the committee.
It's McEntee, please.
Oh, McEntee. I'm so sorry.
You're the second one. It's all right.
Thank you, Chairwoman McEntee and members of the committee for the opportunity to testify on the Home Food Manufacturer Act. My name is Ellen and I work at the Institute for Justice. We are a national nonprofit advocacy organization that supports creating opportunities for home-based food producers to have an accessible path to entrepreneurship. So there are 2 points I would like to emphasize in my testimony today. One, Rhode Island is the only state that only allows farmers to sell their homemade food. And two, that this bill does not change Rhode Island's existing safety framework for homemade foods. So the ability to sell safe, shelf-stable foods, also referred to as cottage foods, made in the home can create an enormous opportunity for people who are struggling to make ends meet. Cottage food businesses are a way for entrepreneurs with big dreams but little capital to get started small in their home kitchens without having to spend thousands of dollars on professional equipment or commercial kitchen space. Nearly every state in the country has embraced these businesses as job creators, but Rhode Island has fallen behind on this opportunity. Cottage foods have proven benefits of increasing self-employment opportunities, especially for women, and increasing food access in food deserts and allowing more consumer choice while allowing consumers to eat local. As Rhode Islanders recover from the pandemic, home-based food businesses can create jobs and expand access to local food. Unfortunately, like I mentioned earlier, Rhode Island is the only state that only allows farmers to sell their homemade foods. That means while a farmer can sell a homemade chocolate chip cookie, a home baker cannot sell the exact same cookies without breaking the law. Rhode Island's current law is keeping families across the state from an opportunity to earn extra income and contribute to the economy. However, a reform like HB 5758 is proven to create jobs. For example, since 2016, Delaware, Connecticut, and Kentucky have all opened their cottage food laws to allow for all people to sell cottage foods, not just farmers. These states have seen a boon of entrepreneurship. In information obtained through FOIA requests as of early 2021, Connecticut has over 400 and Kentucky has over 900 registered cottage food producers, whereas Rhode Island has just 6 registered farm home food manufacturers. So this reform will create economic opportunity. And the foods that home food manufacturers are allowed to sell are limited to non-potentially hazardous foods, which are inherently safe. The likelihood of a person becoming sick from a cottage food is very low. You can see evidence for this claim in my written testimony. Additionally, the department has allowed farmers to participate in this type of entrepreneurship for several years. This bill is simply expanding the existing regulatory framework to allow all Rhode Islanders to participate in this accessible path to entrepreneurship. So whether a home kitchen on a farm, a home kitchen in the suburbs, a home kitchen in the city, anyone should be able to participate in the accessible path to entrepreneurship. I urge the committee to support HB 5758. And once again, thank you, Chairwoman McEntee and members of the committee for the opportunity to testify in favor of HB 5758.
Thank you, Ellen. And I want to recognize that Representative Grace Diaz is present. And would you like your vote counted in the affirmative? Representative Diaz?
Yes, Chairwoman, and also be count present.
Very well. Thank you very much. And we have a question from Representative Carson.
Actually, I have a comment that I'd like to make, and I'm glad that the last witness spoke about the farms. I want to say that I'm a co-sponsor of this bill, and generally I think that one of the charges of this committee is to really evaluate new forms and new business plans and new forms of entrepreneurialism, and I think that COVID has brought us to a place where we're looking at things differently. And as the chairwoman said, we've been in a lot of discussions the last 2 weeks about this bill, and some of the research that I have done on this bill particularly has taken me to research what a farm kitchen is. And I think it's important to note that farms, let's talk about what's actually in this bill. Because while the notion is a really good idea and I support it, what this bill is actually doing, the statute generally regulates farm kitchens. And what this bill is doing is it's taking farm out of the statutory language and just opening it up to kitchens in a variety of ways. And you can all go look at that language. We all have access to the bill. And so when I researched farms fall under a wide variety of statutes and regulations. And if you actually start looking at what are farm kitchens, they are really governed by a wide variety of regulations that the home-based businesses and cottage-based businesses don't really meet. In order to be a farm in Rhode Island, you have to do certain things with taxation, you have to demonstrate a certain amount of income, and I think that to some extent I've had some thoughts that this bill, or the language of this bill, is going to complicate the farm certifications vis-a-vis the cottage kitchen certifications. You know, so I'm looking at the registration form. Right now I'm looking at the registration form for a farm kitchen, and they have to attach a letter from the Rhode Island Division of Taxation certifying exemptions from taxes under statute 44-1830. They have to attach a sketch of the property, dwelling, farm, septic disposal system indicating the distance between the well and the septics. They have to attach a copy of the results stating the water's fit for human consumption. These are the things that farm kitchens have to do. They have to do that because they're farms. So I'm concerned about the way this bill is written, that we're going to take farm out of the statutory language in order to accommodate the cottage industries, which I support, and I'm not quite sure this is the right way. So I really wanted to bring to the attention of the committee and the chairwoman who wrote this, and I know she's been working on it and soliciting opinions, particularly mine. I'm certainly willing to work on this. I caution us against approaching it from this tack, based on what I've learned about farms. I think that we may be opening up a can of worms by taking farm out of the statute and really making farm-related products more vulnerable because they fall under the compliance of other laws and regulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Carson. You may have a good point there, because what we did was we took out farm home food manufacturers. So we took out farm home and just replaced it with home. So we basically took the word farm out in many of the paragraphs. So I don't know if we can probably rework the language to include both.
Yes.
Under different criteria. But, you know, I'm certainly open to amendments, and I realize that we're going to have to do that.
Farm and home-based businesses,
Right.
maybe would be
So
better.
farm,
Yeah.
home, and home food businesses. Yep.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be a bad idea. Thank you very much. With that, we'll go on to our next witness. Again, I urge you to keep to the 3 minutes. Lisa Raiola from Hope in Maine. Lisa, are you with us?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and Representatives Courtfriend, Caldwell, and Carson for the opportunity to testify today and continue to contribute to this exciting dialogue on the introduction of new cottage laws for Rhode Island. My name is Lisa Raiola. I'm the president and founder of Hope in Maine in Warren. We're a 501c3 with a mission to empower an inclusive community of entrepreneurs to jumpstart and cultivate thriving food businesses that are the foundation of a more just, sustainable, and resilient food economy. We renovated an 18,000 square foot, 100-year-old elementary school in Warren to build Rhode Island's first culinary incubator. We have 4 fully equipped commercial kitchens, a demonstration kitchen, cold and dry storage, as well as the business and technical resources to help aspiring foodpreneurs to launch and scale their businesses. But we offer much more than rental kitchens. We offer an incubation curriculum and related services that assist our members to build successful businesses. Our classes cover corporate formation, business planning, food safety and production, packaging and labeling, marketing and branding, as well as sales and distribution. And you know, we opened our doors in 2014 with the assistance of a $3 million USDA Community Facilities Rural Development loan, and in the past 7 years, we've launched close to 300 food businesses in Rhode Island. More than 50% of those businesses are owned by women and people of color. We've created thousands of jobs and poured millions of dollars into the Rhode Island food economy. 1 out of every 4 new consumer packaged goods food businesses domiciled in Rhode Island is established at Hope in Maine, and I'm proud to say that our more than 60 graduates have built their own cafes, restaurants, production facilities, and food trucks that are mostly all here in Rhode Island, contributing to a stronger food economy. To be clear, we accept all entrepreneurs into our program and providing that their project can be legally produced in our facility. And our goal is really to help novice cooks to launch, scale, and eventually graduate into their own space. We take no warrants in these businesses, and we do not benefit financially from their success, other than the state pride we all share in the overall success of so many Rhode Island-born food businesses in the past 7 years. I think it's important to remind people that when I founded Hope in Maine in 2009, that's 12 years ago, it was in the midst of the Great Recession, and my original aim was to start my own food business at that time, but it was not possible because you couldn't find a code-compliant kitchen, and then, like now, there were no cottage laws that provided access for me. So I conceptualize Hope in Maine as a path to food sovereignty, affordable access to markets, and an opportunity to support food startups and small business development in this state in a way that had never been possible. I wanted to democratize food entrepreneurship, and I felt so strongly about this vision that I put my own money into this idea in order to create a shovel-ready project, and to this day, I do not and have never drawn a salary from Hope in Maine. Our origin story and our mission of affordable and equitable access squarely aligns Hope in Maine with the spirit of this bill, and we're anxious to help 1,000 flowers to bloom and build a more robust economy of food makers in Rhode Island, because we believe that a more vibrant and sustainable food economy is built on the shoulders of small food businesses, not the McDonald's of the world. I do want to note that.
Thank you, Lisa. If you could come to a conclusion, please.
Yeah, I do want to note that this bill is not yet clear, as Representative Carson pointed out, about the specifics of how accountability and regulation will take place in this space. And I think it's very important that we clarify that. I think it's important that we create an informed consumer so that consumers understand, the provenance of these foods. I think that addresses of home kitchens should appear on the label, as is the case with many other states. I do not think that we should sell these products across state lines, that they should only be sold at retail without any intermediaries. And just lastly, because, Dale and her colleagues were on, I do want to pay attention to the thousands of food businesses in Rhode Island that are now in compliance with COVID-19 protocols and have some way of ensuring that these businesses are as well. So in conclusion...
Thank you very much, Lisa. I appreciate your testimony. Next, we have Pamela Castro. Again, please watch the time limit, 3 minutes. Pamela, are you with us?
I am.
The floor is yours.
Okay. My name is Pam Castro. Thank you so much for letting me talk tonight. I've known Kara for 25 years. I actually hired her when I was working for Gap Inc., when I was a manager. And I'm just, really proud of her and all that she has done. This has been such a crucial time for small businesses, and I think now, during COVID, we need to embrace people that need and deserve to work from home. Kara's business not only provides for her family, but also for the community, in which they all also enjoy her wonderful desserts. We all deserve to be able to provide for our families, especially when you are raising small children and also trying to teach these children when they are at home. Her talent should be celebrated and commended. I don't feel that she's taken away at all from the brick and mortar. I also work part-time for a small business, so I understand why she does what she does. And I never know that it was never her intention, and she just wants to create and provide for the community. And it all stems from her talent and compassion that she brings to her customers, and I hope that she can do that forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pamela. And our next witness is Nina Wolf Landau. Nina, are you with us? Nina, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
The floor is yours. 3 minutes,
Thank you so
please.
much. Okay, I'll keep it short. Hi, everyone. My name is Nina Wolf-Landau. I'm a Providence resident, and I'm here tonight to testify in support of House Bill 5758. I work in food service. I work at Rebel Cafe. It's a bagel shop here in Providence. I also work for the Rhode Island Food Policy Council. I'm testifying as an individual tonight, but both of those jobs inform my testimony. My boss at Rebel Bagel started our business out of her kitchen selling bagels, and many businesses I know throughout Providence have done the same. They have to test their products. And we know that cottage food laws across many states, all states except New Jersey and Rhode Island right now, have really helped bring money to the state, bring economic prosperity to business owners, and are really important to lower some of the barriers to starting food businesses that are associated with commercial kitchens and shared kitchen spaces. I really think at the end of the day, this is an issue of economic prosperity for the state and also an issue of equity. We know that owners of color have less access to capital, so they have unique barriers in having access to commercial kitchen spaces. So I really urge all of the committee members to support this legislation and to urge their colleagues to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you for your testimony. And the next witness is Megan DiMaggio. Megan, are you with us?
Yes.
You have the floor. Keep it to 3 minutes, please.
Okay. I am in support of this bill. I have several friends that have gone in to do their own personal business out of their house, and I am in full support of them, hoping to continue their business. This is a means of a lifestyle that they had to change to, and in order to support their family, this is how they get their income yearly. So I am in full support, as well as this is something I am hoping for the future for myself, to go ahead and raise a family and start my own business. So I am complete 100% go.
Well, thank you very much, Megan.
Yes.
Our next witness is Jessica Orgram. Hi, Jessica, are you with us?
Hi, I am.
You have the floor. You have 3 minutes, please.
Okay. So I'm a mother of 3 girls, and I'm working full-time at my day job and baking in my spare time. My day job is what pays my bills, while baking is my passion. I just started doing things for my kids, and it just kind of grew from there. I realized I was actually pretty good at baking and decorating. So ultimately, I'd like to have that as my day job, but due to the current laws of Rhode Island, I'm unable to do so, since I'm not permitted to do this out of my home. The thought of opening a bakery and having to take on the cost of all the overhead that comes with that is extremely daunting and overwhelming, and quite honestly, it's not something that's an option for me. Doing so could easily jeopardize my family's financial stability that we have set to ensure the best for our children. My girls, I have 3 of them, they're hockey players. It's their passion. Hockey is a sport that requires a pretty significant financial contribution year after year. Eventually, our girls will be needing a car and heading off to college, and as a mother, I need to make sure that we can give them the best that we can so that they have a bright future. With the way the law is currently written that does not allow for home bakers, this means that I have to give up my passion so they can have theirs. Sacrificing for our children comes with parenting, and I would give up everything for them so that they can have the best future. But in this particular case, I shouldn't have to forego my passion. Other states successfully allow baking businesses from home, and so not only would allowing this in Rhode Island make it so people like me don't have to miss out on something that brings us joy, but we can supplement our income or even have this be our sole source of income without having to worry about taking out loans or paying rent for a facility. Opening a small business is risky, especially in this climate, and it's not something most people like myself can take a chance at without the fear of destroying the financial stability that I've worked so hard for over the course of my working life. I sincerely hope that you'll consider this bill, as this would be life-changing for so many people like myself that have such wonderful talent and an absolute love for baking and want to share it with the world, or at least with some of the local folks who would be happy to support our small business.
Well, thank you very much, Jessica. And I appreciate your support for the bill. We hope it does pass. We're going to work on it. Anyway, the last witness is Lori Camara from Rhode Island Hospitality. Lori, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Good evening.
Good evening. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So, thank you for having me. I obviously work for Rhode Island Hospitality Association as the director of the Education Foundation. I've served as the primary food safety instructor since 2017 at the Hospitality Association and certified food safety instructor and proctor through ServSafe. While it's been brought to our attention that we're only two states, or we're one of only two states that don't have this cottage law, I just want to discuss some concerns that I have with the H5758. So first, Rhode Island restaurants follow the most strict regulations to protect the health and safety of their customers. Each business is mandated to follow the Rhode Island Food Code, which is adapted from the FDA-developed food code. Under this proposed legislation, these home kitchens wouldn't be required to follow this food code. Currently, the food establishment must also have a certified food safety manager on site during all operating hours. This person is trained in well-established food safety principles and requires an 8-hour training and proctored exam session from an accredited program. The food safety manager also includes an allergen training, which is super important to ensure that customers are not unknowingly exposed to allergens when consuming any food product. Let me give you a couple examples as to why I think this is so important. So we know gluten allergy, and we may know somebody that is severely allergic to gluten. If a bakery claims that they have gluten-free choices, but there's regular wheat flour being used in the establishment, they have to actually have a specific hood system to eliminate those particles from the air from being spread to food or surfaces. So unless they're solely gluten-free, they cannot claim that they are a gluten-free bakery. Household surfaces and equipment and storage containers must be made from food-grade materials. I want to give you an example of something that happens at a daycare where they were serving their children lunch, and at lunch, all of the kids were served apple juice. Moments later, one of the daycare workers realized they served their children pine salt. So how did this actually happen? Well, apple juice was being stored in an old chemical container without a label. While that's extreme, it's a perfect example of why we have to take this serious in home kitchens. So storing food is going to be important.
Well, thank you, Lori. I know you probably have submitted written testimony. Unfortunately, we have to give up this room, so to the next committee, and I do appreciate your testimony. I know there's probably plenty of questions from our committee members, but no, they're all shaking their heads no, but thank you very much, Lori. And that concludes the hearing on House Bill 5758. Motion to adjourn by Representative Phillips, second by Representative Courtfriend and Representative Constantino. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Thank you.